Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Thursday, June 7th, 2018. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Council as a Whole Committee meeting. Committee members present this evening, Councilors Caddy, Zarella, Boschman, Squalia, Green, DiNatale, Fleming, Donnelly, and myself, Councilor Kushmerek. Councilors, I'll just make note you received a communication from Mock, as well as you have a packet from Mr. Skorowski at your place setting this evening. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for review of the mayor's FY19 budgets. We'll begin this evening by reviewing line by line each proposed cut in the order they were made on the spreadsheet that you received. We'll do this in the following order that I'll invite the corresponding department head corresponding to the cut that was proposed, allow the department head an opportunity to speak to the cut that has been proposed. Next, the counselor who proposed said cut will have an opportunity to speak, both to justify their cut as well as ask any additional questions of the mayor and department head. And then lastly, other counselors may ask questions. Department heads, to those of you who are here in defending cuts, I would ask that certainly the floor is yours to speak to the cut, but then after that point, once counselors are asking questions, I'd ask that you simply respond to only the questions and not provide commentary on statements made by counselors. There are several cuts this evening or proposed cuts this evening to personnel. I'd remind counselors there are steep and severe legal and financial ramifications for the city when speaking to these proposed cuts. I'd remind you that you should speak on the basis of the financial merits of the cut. They should in no way should the conversation or comments or questions by counselors discuss performance, the person itself, or any past performance. Again, strictly to the merits or the purpose of the cut as it pertains to finance. Otherwise, the city could face severe legal penalties if we do not comply. So if I get the sense that conversation may drift, I may just briefly interrupt just to remind you of that. That said, the first cut, this proposed cut this evening, the next several were proposed by Councilor Boschman. This is on page 9, category of human resources, line item of confidential head clerk. The original amount, $49,556. Proposed reduction in its entirety of the proposed new amount of $0. I'd invite Ms. Davis to join Mayor DiNatale. Good evening.
Good evening.
The floor is yours.
You want me to talk or you?
Ms. Davis, the floor is yours to speak to this.
Okay. Thank you. Nice to be here, I guess. Other circumstances, however. The main responsibility within this particular position, certainly there are numerous. With this particular position, it does require a very high level of confidentiality due to all of the nature of what we do in HR. My department is extremely fast-paced. We have probably 35 to 45 unscheduled drop-ins during the week, which it usually is 7 to 8 people per day, in addition to serving as the first point of contact within my department. Stephanie, or the person in this position, conducts most of the aspects of the hiring process, which is certainly lengthy. In addition, she also conducts all of the onboarding appointments for all new hires. In addition to all of the daily phone calls from various departments, employees, service providers, which could be pre-employment, physical, those providers, or drug testing sites, our workers' comp, third-party administrator. Those phone calls are definitely at a high volume. I don't have an exact number. However, the phone is constantly ringing, and there's someone always in there. Most of the at least right now, the most activity has been in hiring. As you may know, we are in the process of hiring all of our summer help. Those positions, along with the permanent full-time positions that we have hired since December of 2017, is 71. So each of those people need to come to my office. We certainly go through that entire process of posting jobs, posting any advertisements with colleges, online websites, and any other applicable mediums. From that, we go into applicant tracking. All of the resumes are then provided to the department head, the hiring manager, throughout that 2-week job posting period. Stephanie schedules all of the interviews, sends out offer letters and the benefits packages to the final candidate. The scheduling also falls under her for the pre-employment physical and all of the drug screenings, the Corey background checks, I-9 verifications, and reporting to all new to the state of all new hires. She coordinates the start date, again, with the department head or hiring manager, and completes an onboarding appointment with every single employee that takes approximately 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the type of position. She establishes and maintains all of the personnel files. She also assists in putting together all of the training classes for city employees, of which we've already had 6 this year. She also coordinates all of the Department of Transportation drug testing through our consortium, because DOT safety personnel are required to go for random drug testing on periodic implements of time. She schedules all of the DOT physicals as well, which is for 43 DPW employees. She maintains all of the records relative to that and all the licensure of the employees in each division of the DPW. Probably one of the largest things is that we are now, my department is taking over workers' compensation. So in 2004, the Human Resources Department had 2 people, my predecessor and a person that was in there that is still currently the workers' comp analyst. I truly believe that workers' comp belongs in the HR department, and as such, there is just a lengthy list that I'm sure you don't want to hear. I have it all, but for all of the paperwork that is required to get, process a workers' comp claim. That is now coming into my office, and we are about halfway through that transition. We've got an effective date of August 1st that my office will have that. There is not a chance on God's green earth that one person can do all of what Stephanie currently does now, as well as pick up all of the responsibility of processing all of those workers' comp claims. In addition, she also does the departmental payroll, pays all of the invoices, and we recently wanted to have a secondary drug testing provider in Fitchburg. I like to trade locally. Our other one is in Leominster. So we did just sign a contract with them, and so she was instrumental in getting that contract signed and now going through that entire online process, which has greatly increased our ability to get all of the aforementioned appointments set up.
Councillor Boschman, this is your cut. You may speak to this first if you would like.
I'd like to address the mayor.
You may.
Okay. Fellow councilors, approximately maybe 8 months ago to a year, the mayor came in front of this council, not this entire body, because we got 3 new faces or 4 new faces here, but the past body. And the mayor asked for a secretary and human resources. He asked that because the present HR person was going to step into Bernie Stevenson's place, and he was not going to replace her with a secretary, with another person in that position. He made it very, very clear. All of a sudden, as I go through the budget, I see the position. The mayor has never contacted us and said, we're going to fill the position. He just put in there in a line item. So I'm questioning, why didn't he come back in front of the council and ask for that position to be filled? He told us he wasn't going to fill it over a year ago when Miss Davis got hired. And I was based on that thing. When he came in front of us, and I think Council Donald, you might remember, and some of you, Council Joseph, that he said that he wasn't going to have a secretary in that department. And that's why I put the line item on the line on that job. So I'm asking for your support because it was never communicated to us that he was going to backfill this position. I hope I said it right.
Mayor, you were asked a question if you care to respond.
Please, I certainly do. Thank you, Counsel, for your concern. I don't recall that ever committing to that. However, I did, in fact, request this position because, as you could hear from the HR director, it is a necessary position. I brought in Susan Davis. We hired her, yes, with the intent of moving into, after posting it, into the former HR director's position. But why, with an employee population of nearly 500 people, would you expect one person to do that job? I ask you that, if you would, Council President.
Councilor Beauchamp, if you care to respond, you don't have to.
I don't have to respond because I don't want to get into a personal thing now because you told me to watch what I say.
What I don't want is a rebuttal between councilors and department heads or the mayor. But if you have any further comment, you still have the floor, Councilor.
No, that's okay. That's
okay. Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. How many employees do you oversee?
436,
Not including the schools?
not including the schools.
How many grievances do you have?
7, 8.
Okay. 400 plus people. Now, I work in a private company that has 125, and there are 3 HR people for 125. We have 1 for 468. And I can guarantee you with unions, it's more work because the private sector doesn't have to deal with any of that stuff. When the prior HR director was in office, he communicated to the council many times the things he could not do because he was a one-man shop. Whether this is a clerical position or a HR generalist position is irrelevant to me. The fact is there needs to be help in that office in order to drive efficiency. Again, private company has 3 people for 125 employees. Fitchburg has 1 for 468. I don't care what the communication was, whether it should have been clerical or not. Who cares? We had a budget that we passed last year that had the clerical position in there. So to say that this wasn't communicated, well, the battle should have been fought last year. But again, I don't know what battle we're fighting. Whether it's a clerk or an HR generalist, the HR director needs assistance. And therefore, to remove this position outright makes absolutely no sense. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
Hi, Susan. How many work comp cases, I know that you're not handling those, but how many are looking to be in the queue for you to take over in August?
I honestly don't have a number right now. I know right now we're working on, I want to say 38 of them, 38 or 39, because there are, the majority of those come from the school, but we handle all of those. And there is a massive amount of paperwork that goes along, and it is extremely time sensitive. You have a certain amount of days to get that information to the state. So, I think that there are 38.
And out of those, the majority of those are school
Mostly.
related?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is it a full-time, the confidential head clerk, that's a full-time position, a 40-hour work week?
Technically, it's 35, but working 35 hours for Stephanie would be a vacation, quite honestly. She works far more than 35.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilor Squalia?
For the workers' compensation that you're now taking over approximately August 1st, who does that job now? And, will their job be lessened? Will that...
That job right now lies within the treasurer's office, in the payroll office, or treasury department, I should say. There is a workers' comp analyst in there now. She does do the workers' comp, but she also does a lot of other, she helps out with the payroll processing. She handles all of the benefits in terms of enrollments and any issues that employees are, may have. It will lessen what's placed upon that office. I'm sorry? Yes, she is retiring. That is why, yes. Corinne is retiring in September.
The workers' comp analyst within the treasurer's department
Correct.
retiring.
Correct.
When is she retiring? August 1st? Or?
No, September. Look, the end of September.
Yeah. So you'll have like a transition.
We've been training now for about 2.5 months. We do that weekly to learn all of the the paperwork and the flow of everything. But Corinne's position is definitely full time, and she does do far more than workers' comp. But like I said, I happen to believe that should be in the HR department, and it was removed along with the second person in 2004.
Is the workers' comp analyst, is that a specific title from like a course that you take or a certification? Will our confidential head clerk have that knowledge and capability to do it as equal to our retiring workers' comp analyst?
Yes, because we're doing that, and actually I think that Corinne may just sort of organically kind of picked up workers' comp. I don't know. I've only been here for about 2 years, so I can't speak to exactly how she got it. But she's definitely, certainly very knowledgeable, and we're trying to absorb as much of that knowledge as we possibly can. And Stephanie absorbs it quickly.
And with all the roles that you listed, all the duties and responsibilities of your confidential head clerk, taking on in addition workers' compensation, do you anticipate you'll be able to handle and fulfill all the duties and responsibilities as noted while taking on the workers' compensation department?
I do believe so, yes, because we are also trying to streamline some other processes as well. So yes, I do believe that. And like I said, I really think it needs to be within HR.
Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
I just want to emphasize that this is not just from a workload perspective, but from a legal perspective, something that we can't afford to be overloading the department and understaffing the department on this kind of an issue unless we want to be paying out some massive judgments and penalties down the road.
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you. I just have the employment laws or any laws changed drastically in the last year? Because going back to the number of years I was served on a council years ago, not quite as far back as Councilor Naylor, now Commissioner Naylor, but I've never heard anyone give a warning about talking about lawsuits if you talk about people's jobs, or never heard that warning before.
If you would.
I honestly, there are, as soon as you get into discussing someone's either performance, you're not talking about a position. If you're talking about specifically that employee, that gets into a totally confidential area that is not subject for public or open forum. That it has to do with HR, the employee, or the hiring manager. But yes, we have had a lot of laws. As a matter of fact, on July 1st, no one will be able to ask any type of salary information. So all of the applications will be redone. Governor Baker put that law into effect, and it's effective July 1st. You can't ask anybody about the salary.
The taxpayers can't know what the people are being paid?
In this particular, the municipalities are exempt because it's public record, but we cannot ask them in an interview. You can't have it on an application. So there are a lot of things like that, certainly the rules that have laws that have changed just this year.
Second question, retirees on disability. Is that in your department? Any follow-up on people that are out retired on disability, but
That is not, it's
not
within
in
the,
purview?
no.
Or termination of people maybe doing illegal things while on duty in the city? Is that your purview?
Yes.
If someone they just discharge or retire and then no lesson learned by anybody else? Is that?
I don't think I understand the
Okay,
question.
well, I'll leave it at that then. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. It's a salaried job.
Correct.
Is it salary plus overtime, where you indicated she works more than 35 hours a
She
week?
is it's a Fair Labor Standard Act, or FLSA, exempt position. So due to the type of position, because it deals with confidentiality, she is exempt from overtime.
Councillor Boschman.
Now, correct me if I'm mistaken. You said a vast majority of your cases, the workman's comp cases, are from the school department.
Right now, that's correct.
Right now.
Yeah.
So the school department does not handle?
No,
Their
no,
own?
nor would I recommend that happen, not because of anything to do with the school, but because it needs to be streamlined in one location. It needs to all be under one roof. And it makes the most sense that it would be under the city's HR, not the schools.
So, and we don't collect any money from the school department?
Not that I know
For
of.
our work being done?
If I may answer, the workers' comp is part of the indirect charges that we assess to the school department in calculating net school spending. So
Okay.
they do pay their share.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. And to make one thing clear, I want to say one other thing, and then I'll drop the subject. In regards to HR, when I worked at General Electric, we had one HR person, and we had 1,000 employees. One HR with 1,000 employees. So I just want to let that know on record. And it seemed to run very smoothly. And I think the city ought to think green, like we're always hearing in manufacturing, think green, because you save money. Thank you.
Councillor Zarella.
In response to that, I'd just like to suggest that labor law is an incredibly rapidly evolving field of law. So, frankly, maybe a while back you could get away with one HR person for 1,000 because there were just fewer regulations to comply with. And for a city, there's even more because there's all sorts of constitutional issues and whatnot, not as free a hand as a private company would have. So,
I would like to just say one quick thing. In terms of that, I know, Councilor Boschman, you didn't have the opportunity to come to my office to discuss this beforehand. So if you would like to certainly come in and we can talk about, exactly really what does happen in the office, and I'll better explain to you why one person, even doing 1,000, that's crazy. But I would be more than happy to meet with you at any time.
Councillors, I'd ask for all of these cuts, whether or not you're for them, I'd ask for a motion and second in the affirmative, and then so that way it's a yes or no vote on the proposed cut itself. Councillors who made the recommendation can also, for the purpose of this meeting, make said motion.
You want me to make that motion?
I would.
What, to leave it?
I'm asking for everything to be made in favor to move forward with the cut. Thank you.
Second. Of the HR headquarters.
I have a motion and second to accept the cut in the amount of $49,556 to the confidential head clerk position in Human Resources. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor of the cut? One in favor. Councillor Boschman. All those in opposition? Councillor Squalia, Green, Di Natale, Fleming, Donnelly, Kushmerik, Caddy, and Zarella. In the opposition. Motion fails to carry. Next, we have in the assessors category, contract services, original amount of $150,000, proposed reduction in its entirety from the proposed new amount of $0. Councilors, this is page 11 in your packet. And do we have Mr. Turigny speaking to these, or is this you, Mayor?
It will be me. I do have a question, Mr. President. Can we have the counselor offering the cut to present why initially, and then we'll respond following that? Is that acceptable?
Any concerns from councilors?
Yeah, I'd have a concern.
You'd prefer to hear from the department head
I'd
first?
like to hear them first, and let them explain why we shouldn't cut it, and then I'll come back.
Well,
Mr. Councilor Di Natale.
I think the counselors who make the recommendation should explain why, not have the administration start the discussion. They didn't put the cut on the table. Some of us did. So we should open the discussion up to explaining why, and then let them counter.
Any concern with me doing this, Rob?
I mean, I don't understand why that's even an issue.
So, councilors who would prefer to hear from the councilor who proposed the cut first, if you could just raise your hand, just for a straw poll. All right, thank you. Councilor Boschman, you're going to be asked to at least speak to. You'll certainly have an opportunity. What's that? Okay, and so, Councilor Scalia, this is the same cut to this same area. So I'll provide. Councilor Boschman, if you would speak just briefly, and then you'll also have an opportunity to certainly ask questions and follow up. You both made the same cut for $150,000 to the contract. So, would you like to speak first, Councilor Boschman, since I called on you?
All right, I'll speak first. I have no problem with that. The reason why I propose this cut is I believe that the chief assessors or the assessor's office should stay in the city of Fitchburg and be in-house. There's a personal touch. I keep on saying it, and the personal touch is very important. Now, I'm told that if we put it out for bid and we go out and hire somebody in-house, we can't get anybody. Well, I'm disagreeing with that fact, that there is plenty of people that want to come to Fitchburg, and they're even asking, why is Fitchburg taking the route they're taking? Now, the town of Marlborough, Massachusetts, found out the assessor's office. They found it out. Lo and behold, they're bringing it back. And they want an in-house assessor. Because they found out it's not working to what they expected. And they want the thing back in-house. So I really believe that there's a personal touch for the residents and for the assessor and the city of Fitchburg, that we should not farm out this position. This is not good for us. We got a lot of things going. We get excise taxes, evaluations, and everything else where they can answer. Where if we get somebody, they don't know. They don't know the people of Fitchburg. They don't know. I know one councilor is going to say, well, we hired somebody from Fitchburg right now and he's doing the job. I understand that. But it's not the same. It is not the same. Now, some of you go to stores or you get on the phone and you get an answer machine and you get upset because you can't talk to a person about your problem. Well, if we have the assessors there, the proper assessors there, we can resolve those issues and we can solve them. We're making a big mistake by farming this job out. We're not saving anything in the long run. Look at Marlborough, Massachusetts. They found out their assessors, and they brought them back. I talked to, today, let's see, I lost it. I talked to the Massachusetts Association of Assessors Office. I called them up, and I asked them what they thought if this was a good move. And actuality, they said themselves, they don't believe it's a good move for the city of Fitchburg to do that. And in that web of the people that are in the assessor's office ask the same questions, and they are willing to apply for the job if we open it up. So when somebody tells me we can't get anybody, and I make a phone call, and they said they're waiting to come in. They want to come in. And we don't go out. So that's what I get to say about that.
Councilor Scalia, would you like to provide commentary as well?
Sure, yeah. So for me, feel so strongly about the personal touch as Councillor Boschman, but for me, it's purely the value increase. You know, the $150,000 for the contract services is approximately $83,000 more than what we had when we had a chief assessor. And I would hope that we can save money when we farm it out or have contracted services. Like, for example, with our animal control, we now have contracted services, and it's overall saving us money. But the assessor contracted services is overall costing us more. And I would love to hear that explanation from the mayors and the mayor's representative on that.
Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Boschman, for your concerns. First of all, as mayor, I've decided to go with contract services. It's that simple. In terms of your question, Councilor Squalia, the cost of this position, when you include benefits and health care, is much closer to 130 than it is to 83 or whatever your number was. And this was an opportunity for me, as the chief executive, is to take a slight bite out of our OPEB obligations, to free some of that up. And it was due to a retirement, which is painless. Person left, retired. I chose not to replace him. Your comment regarding Marlboro. I had a conversation with the mayor of Marlboro, who happens to be a friend of mine, not more than a week ago. They've done no changes in their assessor's office. I don't know where you're getting your information,
That's
Councilor.
not what I'm told.
Well, who's the source that you're getting it from?
When I called up that office today, this afternoon at
Yeah.
4:05.
No, you
this
asked them if it was a good thing to do.
Mayor.
You didn't ask them if they were...
Mayor, I'd ask you to avoid a back and
Thank you.
forth with councilors.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I was addressing the mayor, not you, Councilor Boschman. Councilor Di Natale.
So it's not 83,000 more, it's 45,544 more. And that's not including the benefits. So it's almost a wash. But let's say it's $15,000 more. Any analysis you do, simple math, between a contractor and a full-time hire, every time the full-time hire is going to cost more. Every single time. Why? Because after 30 years of working for the city, they collect 30 years of pension and health insurance benefits after they're done working. Contractor doesn't get that. Not to mention, contractor can be let go whenever we feel like it. Not tied to any union contract. We talk all the time about having almost a $300 million unfunded liability, and when the administration actually makes a move to lessen the payroll by one because of a retirement, we're going to fight it. I don't care about a personal touch. I care about the job getting done. And the job's getting done. Now, let's hypothetically say if this council agrees with this reduction, that we vote for it. Problem is, this is for the full amount for 1 year. So on July 1st, there'll be no chief assessing. So if the council was serious about reducing this to force the administration to put out a hire, you'd have to give them at least 5 or 6 months to do that. So this number would have to be at least half that number, 75,000. So that's the first reason why the 150 makes no sense. The second reason it makes no sense is because it's going to cost us more to rehire somebody than it is to do what we're doing right now. And the third reason is I have not seen any evidence to suggest that the efficiencies have gone down. This is what happens when you make a change to things that have been happening for 30 years straight. People don't like the change. Well, too bad. I've tried to seek other areas in this city to privatize, to no avail, not because of the job, not because of the person, but because we're drowning in unfunded liabilities that this council may not care about now, but in 15 to 20 years, you will. So it's less costly. The efficiency is the same. There are several communities in Massachusetts who use this company. And an added bonus is they could have put anybody in this office. They put a Fitchburg resident in this office. So it's not some person who's foreign to the city. So Again, this is another cut that I do not see makes any sense at all from a cost perspective and from an efficiency perspective. And if the efficiencies get worse, we can easily change it. That's the joy of doing this. No one asked the previous assessor to retire. He chose to. So this is what they decided to do in the interim. And apparently the job is getting done well, which is why they want to extend it. But again, if anybody's looking at this from a one-year perspective, you got to look at it from a 30-year perspective. This is cheaper. Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you. I'm all for change. One, I think it's really good for the city. And we talked about 30 years ahead, as the councilor just said. I can go 30 years back. And most of the head assessors, I think it was Toivo Javi, Councilor Naylor might be able to tell me different, Dan Pickarainen, Buddy Talbot was in the office, Phil Gaudette, Tom Caputi, all Fitchburg people that know most every street and almost every house in the city. Ken Wilson grew up in Fitchburg, but he didn't live in Fitchburg at the end. My question is a full-time person versus a part-time person. This agency is not going to be there full-time, to my understanding. And there are some certain legal technicalities regarding the assessors. There's supposed to be a chairman. The chairman is a chairman or chairwoman, or the chair of the, they're supposed to be elected by the three people on. So those are technicalities that aren't going to be ironed out here. But I still think it's full-time versus part-time, and a local person that knows the streets versus someone that comes in qualified to be an assessor. But I don't see how a person from out of town can be as friendly to the taxpayer or anybody that may be a future investor in the city on a phone call. But I am welcome to the change. I understand that the dollar parts about it, but full-time versus part-time, I'm not happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Zarella.
First, I'd just like to, for anyone following along on the budget sheet, relative to Councillor Di Natale's comment about the actual increase in cost, the issue there, the reason why it's less than the full amount is because you have to actually look at FY17, because FY18 was a partial year. The previous chief assessor did not work the entirety of FY18, so that was not a full year's salary. So we're not comparing to the 52,316, we're comparing to the 92,290. As to the issue about someone in-house versus contracts in Fitchburg versus out of Fitchburg, as we discussed back when we were first discussing having an interim contract assessor, the position of assessor in general is one that the state of Massachusetts as a whole is starved for. There are vacancies across the state. So if we were going to put out a bid for in-house, or put out a posting for in-house, we'd probably wind up with someone who isn't from Fitchburg, simply because there's so few across the state who are available. We'd have to take someone, whoever we can get, who probably isn't going to be from Fitchburg. Right now, even though it's contract, even though it's not someone who's exclusively on our payroll, it is a Fitchburg guy. We don't have someone coming from outside who isn't familiar with Fitchburg. We have someone who lives in Fitchburg.
Councillor Squalia.
Was the 150,000 budgeted here, was that put out to bid?
Yes. Yes, excuse me. It went out to bid this week.
It went out to bid this week?
Yes.
So we haven't gotten the bids back?
Correct. And we wouldn't be opening the bids on a price basis at the beginning. It would be based off of qualifications.
And where did the $150,000 budget for the contracted services for the new assessor, where did that
based on the evaluation of what we're currently paying RRG?
Okay.
Councilors, I'd ask for a motion at this time.
Motion to approve the $150,000 cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut of $150,000 to the contract services in the assessor's budget.
On the motion?
On the motion, Councilor
On the
Boishman.
motion, I only got one thing to say. If we feel the way we do, and we want to farm out, then we ought to look at every department where we can save a buck. Every one. That's all I have to say. Every department. Because I'll go with all of you. As much as I'm a union man, I'll go. And I'll farm out work. I have no problem with it. But we do the same for every department. Because I can go by Marlboro and what they depart out too. And it seems like different things are happening in that town. So I'll go that way.
Councilor Zarella.
I'd just like to point out that I take Councillor Boishman's point, but this is a situation where we had a pre-existing vacancy because of a retirement. To actually terminate a position that's currently filled is considerably more problematic than simply deciding not to refill an existing vacancy. So if we wanted to look at, contract services for other departments, it seems to me the sensible thing would be to do that as the positions become vacant, not to sort of aggressively go at emptying those positions.
Councilor Di Natale.
There's a methodology why this took place, as Councilor Zarella said, as opposed to just, and I'll just use me as an example. It's a documented fact that I have looked for other agencies to privatize. We had very heated debate discussions about it in the past. Those who were here at the time know what I'm talking about. But I always want the conversation to be focused on the following, because I don't want to be misunderstood. I am not saying that full-time employees that get benefits are not valuable, that they don't do the job well. I'm merely looking at the unfunded liabilities, and in areas that are practicable to possibly farm out, we should look at. But this does not mean that we should just steamroll every department and say we're going to put private people in there. That's not what I'm talking about. I've never said that. But I also don't want to hear the suggestion, well, let's look at other places. I've done that multiple times, and I've been shot down with extreme prejudice. So in this instance, it opened up. No one asked for this. So to me, I think this is a smart move. Thank you.
Councilor Donnelly.
I'll go along with the fact of what, not everything Councilor Boishman said, but the part about looking at farming it out, just as Councilor Di Natale said it, I think it's a wonderful thing. And if you are trying to save benefits and retirement, all of the bennies to go along with it, contract services is the way to go.
I have a motion and second on the floor in favor of the cut. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Well, I'm not in favor. I'm not in favor. I'm sorry about that.
You're in favor of the cut, Councilor Boishman, correct?
I'm in favor not to farm it out. That's I know I'm not in favor.
All right. So,
Was that a yes?
Vote on it.
so Councilor Boishman, you were voting in the affirmative.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So the vote fails by a margin of 1 to 8.
9.
1 to 9. Thank you. Councilor Walsh has now joined us. Motion fails to carry. Next we have Community Development, Director of Economic Development, for a total of $89,284. Proposed reduction in its entirety for a new amount of $0. Councilors, this is on page 29. Good evening, Mr. Skrowski. Councilor Boishman, this is your cut. If you would kindly speak to this first.
Well, the way I'm going 0 for 3 here. I sound like I'm striking out. On that particular cut, I listened 4 years ago, and I wasn't kind of in favor, but I went along with the vote to try an economic, try that. I think the city should take a different route. That's how I feel. That there should be a different route taken for that department. That's all I feel. That's why I made the cut.
Counselor Green?
I've always been in favor of economic development for this community in general. I'm in favor of how the department is put together. I'm in favor of the work they're doing. We have never had a bigger increase in the economic development than we've had in the past 3 years since we've been sitting on council, and I mean the ones that have been here for a while. So to pull the rug out from underneath the feet of the department doesn't make any sense when we've heard that over and over again that Fitchburg is open for business. Who is going to take care of that if you eliminate this position? So I will never be in favor of cutting community development from this community. Thank you.
Counselor Caddy?
So, when you make a cut like this, you have to have a plan. Councilor Boschman said he thinks we should take another route. What is the other route he wants us to take? Through you, Mr. President.
Counselor Boschman, if you'd like to respond, if you have another.
Well, Mr. Caddy, Council Caddy, I think if the other route was we all sit down and we discuss the other route. Like we're doing right now, as a happy group.
Counselor Caddy?
So what we would do is eliminate an important position, but not have a plan in place before we do it? Is that what Councilor Boschman is saying to me?
I believe that's what he has said.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Di Natale?
So, starting in FY16, this position came on full-time. The reason it came on full-time is because it didn't exist. The previous administration cut the position when they came on. You could say justifiably so because we were near bankruptcy, and said that the mayor would take on the responsibility. Well, no disrespect, but the mayor didn't take on the responsibility, which is why we came back to the drawing board and brought the position back. No disrespect to the previous mayor, they have a lot to do. And I don't think adding this on their plate helps. Now, they're a marketer, they're a promoter, but this is a position that focuses solely on the commercial aspect of our city. And one of the concerns when we brought the position back on, one of them that I addressed and former Councilor Tran addressed and some others did, was how do you quantify and assess the performance or the impact of having this position in the city? And we were just given a treasure trove of information and testimony from businesses, select businesses, about what the position has brought to them and all of the development that's going on. Now, the Economic Development Director position has to work with the mayor in tandem. The mayor sets the policy. Problem before 2016 is no one was focused on it. The mayor thought they could do it. They couldn't do it. They got too much to do. So the position is necessary and crucial. And I'm actually happy to see what we were given tonight, and I will be sure to read over it over the weekend about the good things people are writing about this individual and the data about commercial permits and projects per year. So, like Councilor Caddy was inferring, and like I inferred at the last discussion about cutting a whole amount and not just partial, you get rid of this, we've got nothing on July 1st with no Plan B. What's Plan B other than it's back in the administration's office? And I don't have a lot of confidence in the mayor to do this job because they've got a lot of other stuff going on. It's well documented. You need someone focused on this. So if we're looking to reduce payroll, this is not the area I would suggest. And what frustrates me about these kinds of cuts that are recommended, that in my opinion, I'm not criticizing you, I don't think we're given much thought. We have to have the department head and the employee then get concerned for weeks that, oh, what's going to happen? And they have to go and they have to get all this information. We should be getting it anyway, but they have to go and now give us all this information. And I think, quite frankly, unless we request that information through a normal process, this is a waste of their time. But I'm glad they did it. I think they should do it once a year. We get departmental reports every year from police, fire, building, everywhere. That's their way of telling us what they're accomplishing. So I don't want it to be lost on the fact that this is not pertinent information that we shouldn't be given, but the fact that they had to give it to us because of this frustrates me. Because primarily because there's no plan B. Let's just get rid of it and we'll talk about it later. Not a smart way to approach this if you have serious concerns about this. So I'm a no 100%. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll agree with the comments made so far by Councilors Green, Di Natale, and Councilor Caddy. I think we're on the verge of, Fitchburg's on the verge of probably its greatest period of economic development that we've had in some time. And I think to cut this position at this point in time is short-sighted at best.
I too look at this and say, if we defund this position, we're saying we choose not to have economic development in our city, and we do it at a time of unprecedented economic growth and development. Look no further than Game On Fitchburg, or some of the growth in the medical marijuana industry and the revenue that has come into this city. Sure, we have a long way to go. I'm not saying that we have reached our economic pinnacle, but that comes with continued, sustained, and further investment in economic development, not less. So I'm certainly not in favor of this cut.
Motion to approve the cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor of the cut? One in favor, Councillor Boschman. All those opposed? 9 in opposition. Motion fails to carry.
You wrote a really nice speech.
Next, we have airport administrative assistant. Original amount of $52,624. Proposed reduction in its entirety for a proposed new amount of $0. Councilors in the public, page 42 in the budget packet, if you're following along. Councilor Boschman, if you would.
No, Mr. President, I will not go this time. The airport chair, I made a proposed bid of cutting $50,000 from the budget. Let them explain to the public why we shouldn't cut $50,000 from their budget.
That's it. Commissioner Naylor, would you like to join us? Thank you, Commissioner Naylor, for joining us. The head of our airport commission, and Mr. Ellis, good evening.
Didn't we just agree that he needs to explain?
I believe that was his statement.
Oh, okay.
If either of you gentlemen would like to address the proposed reduction.
Yes, sir, I can. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about staffing at the airport in general and this position in particular. 20 years ago, this airport had a much larger staff than it does now. There were 2 full-time linesmen, 3 part-time linesmen working 20 hours a week, and 2 more full-time summer help, as well as a manager, an assistant manager, and an administrative assistant. When I took over this job in 2012, that had been whittled down to 2 full-timers and 2 full-time linesmen, 3 part-time linesmen, a manager, and an administrative assistant. The position of assistant manager and administrative assistant were combined. Now we have the manager and administrative assistant position is being discussed tonight. 2 full-time linesmen and 1 part-time linesman who only works 10 hours a week. We have reduced the staffing at that airport as much as we can, and still able to keep it as a viable entity. To speak specifically to the administrative assistant, aviation is a paperwork-intensive industry. If I want to do something as simple as cutting down a tree, I can't simply go and cut down a tree. I have to talk with the FAA, Massachusetts Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division, the Conservation Commission, State Fish and Wildlife, State Conservation Commission, and a couple of other federal agencies, just for them to say, yes, you can cut this down. When we have a grant, it's not simply a piece of paper, it's usually volumes. And right now, we have several grants that are being administered. Removal of this position would handicap my ability to run that airport.
Councilor Zarella.
I just want to note, as with one of the previous proposed cuts, I think it's important for the public to understand that in a lot of these departments, we see administrative assistant. It doesn't just mean someone who answers the phones, runs the copier, takes notes, whatever. It's important regulatory compliance work. And if this sort of stuff gets flubbed, it's not just, oh, oops. It's agencies, state and federal, breathing down our necks. So we do not want positions like this to be underfilled or overworked.
Councillor Boschman.
I own a business, and my business is not breaking even. It's behind. I'm running in the red. I'm running in the red. Do I keep my fellow employee, or do I start trying to stay afloat? Common sense and business thinking, you try to stay afloat. Year after year, they're taking a decrease in their wages. They're behind in the payments to the city of Fitchburg. Behind in the payments. Their fuel cost has gone from fuel cost from 2012 $625,000 to $272,000 according to the chart sheet. They're behind over $100,000 in payments to the city of Fitchburg, indirect. Am I right, Mr. Brooks? They're also behind in payments for their terminal to the city of Fitchburg, besides the state paying 80%. Now, I went in there and I was asked that I had to pick a budget line because I said I want to cut $50,000 from the airport because you're behind. They said you can't do that. You have to pick a line item. So I said, okay, line item, the budget, $50,000 right there. If the council wants to cut it somewhere else, I have no problem with that. Let me tell you, why should I and why should my constituents pay for the airport? I don't have an airplane. I don't have a helicopter. It gives me nothing. Nothing. You cut down on the entertainment and that. You're over $100,000 behind. You're also behind on your payments for the terminal that we just built. And you're saying, oh, everything's fine and dandy. Well, everything's not fine and dandy. So I'm waiting for their rebuttal.
So I'm a member of the Airport Commission, and I'm not saying that council shouldn't be scrutinizing the airport's budget. It has lost revenue, but this shouldn't come as a surprise. About 5 years ago, we had the Airport Commission come in front of us, as well as city officials, and talk about the long-term financial feasibility of the airport. We approved large loan orders to move forward with the airport projects. We also knew that our night approaches were down. There were a number of reasons why we were hampering or why the business model was suffering. And they came to us with a long-term model and method of feasibility of we're going to operate with some losses over the next 5 years. We need to complete this construction, and then we'll be on a path towards financial sustainability. So, while yes, we should be looking at it, we should be scrutinizing, and we should be asking questions about, are we on the right path to financial affordability and stability for the city? But this does not deviate from the plan that was presented to me as a councillor 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year. And I don't see anything that so starkly concerns me that says we are off our projections towards profitability and a return into the black in just a few years' time. We know that in the next couple of years we're going to have to shut down one of the runways for a little bit as well. I know right now that next year's budget may reflect yet another drop in revenue. That shouldn't surprise us, again, because that's been part of the plan. When we talk about undercutting a position, I would say that undermines our ability to return to profitability, but I would say that it also puts us in a position to be fined as a city. We talked about the onerous process of cutting down a tree, never mind navigation easements, runway expansions, or any of the other onerous requirements, not to mention they're a landlord, and everything else. This position plays an important role in administrating all of those things. Lastly, I would say, to those that doubt whether or not we should have an airport, that decision was made for us a very long time ago when we decided to accept an airport into the city. And the last time this conversation progressed in this direction of whether or not we would like to have an airport, the FAA actually flew an official in from Washington, D.C., and sat before this body and said, if you choose to do so, that's certainly within your rights, but you will owe us the balance of every federal grant that was ever given, and that would total tens of millions of dollars. Airport commissioners of the past and the present remind me of that day, and it was a dark day for both the airport and the city when Washington, D.C. was saying, sure, if you'd like to pull out a check for tens of millions, we'd be happy to take that, and you can have that land back. We chose to accept an airport then. We chose to accept the grant funding for runway expansion and navigation easements 5 years ago, and with that extended our commitment as a city to the airport. It is past the point for us. It is past the point for us to turn back. The airport is here. It's a tool of economic viability, sustainability, and eventual growth. We need to continue to invest in it. Sometimes that means, as part of any business, taking an acceptable loss for a short period of time to ensure that we grow. I think we're in that time. And for councilors that are concerned, I'd be happy to work with City Auditor Brooks and Chairman Di Natale of the Finance Committee to schedule time for us to have a further discussion about the short and long-term financials of the airport. But certainly I would not be in favor of this cut at this time. Councillor Squalia.
I'd just like to start on the last of Councillor Boschman's cuts with the airport on expressing my gratitude for Councillor Boschman's cuts for the various departments. Because without these cuts, we wouldn't be able to have these discussions in the public in the budget forum that we have. You know, in the past, we used to be able to watch as the public all the different department heads discuss what they do and discuss the different, you know, the importance of their jobs and the importance of the budget items that they have. But we don't have that ability anymore unless we propose cuts. So I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Boschman for proposing these cuts. And on that note, with the airport, I agree with President Kushmarek with the notation of the future plan for the airport and its potential future economic growth that it provides the city of Fitchburg. And on, you know, past reflection on why it has been losing money, which Councillor Boschman is right. It is behind $100,000 in payments, indirect payments to the city or reimbursement for city-related costs, which that is coming before the Finance Committee within, I think, the next week, the $100,000 to approve that so that we have that in our, what's the fund called, Mr. Brooks? It's not a revolving fund.
Reserve for appropriation.
Reserve for appropriation, so that we don't have the airport in debt, right? Now, when Councilor Bushman said we're also behind, the airport is also behind in its payment for the share of the debt service for the new terminal, is that that's approximately $65,000 a year, correct? Are we behind in that?
We're not behind in it. We haven't started repaying it yet.
When will the repayments for that?
I'd ask Mr.
Yeah,
Brooks.
that would be I believe in the next in the FY19 budget, within the debt service line item is included payments related to the airport terminal of the airport administration building.
And so we're on track to pay that approximately $65,000 share. The airport's on track to pay that, to be able to afford that.
Yes.
To the city. Okay. And so, so on why the airport has not been profitable, I sat down with Mr. Ellis And it was noted in 2014, we had an IFR restriction, the instrument rating restriction on why we can't, planes and jets can't land at night, right? Which has dropped us approximately $50,000 per year in revenue.
Approximately. We lost a significant amount of jet fuel sales because of that.
Jet fuel sales. We also lost a Bullock charter.
Yes.
Because they could no longer utilize our airport for an instrument rating.
The issue was that the night approaches, the instrument approaches were shut off, and that also scared away a lot of the people who would fly in during the day because they didn't want to get stuck at the airport at night. So it didn't just limit the night flights; it limited our day flights for corporate jets. We have gotten one of those approaches turned back on last month. The other approach should be turned back on probably by the end of the year. So we are on track. But Councilor Kuchmarek was right. This is a multi-year project, and things are going to be tough for a few years until it's completed.
Yep. So we had a restriction on 1-4, and it was just lifted.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll expect that we can start getting more jets. And
Had a jet fly in yesterday, purchased 402 gallons of jet fuel, which is our largest one-day sale probably in the last year and a half.
wow, what kind of jet was it?
As a Cessna Citation.
Cessna Citation. Oh, all right. And so then on the opposite end of the same runway, runway 32, that you anticipate the IFR restriction will be lifted by the end of this year.
Yes.
And the first and the 1-4, that was because trees were growing too high.
Yes, there are vegetative obstructions on both ends.
Yep. And so once we have both by the end of the year, December-ish, you anticipate we'll be increasing our revenue by approximately $50,000.
That's a generous estimate, but it is possible.
Generous. Okay. And then your future plans for revenue is also to discontinue the cross runway?
Yes.
0220
0220.
and put a solar field in order to reclaim.
That's one of the potential uses for that land. The runway is being closed because it's no longer compliant with FAA regulations, because there's rising terrain on either side. So when the new runway is rebuilt and repaved, the crosswind runway will be going away. Now that crosswind runway is only used probably about 5% of the time. So the land west of the new runway, which is where we're proposing a solar farm, gives us about a 30-acre area where a solar farm would work. A similar solar farm was just installed down at Barnstable Airport in 20 acres, and that is expected to generate about $16 million over its 20-year life. So that alone, if that project is successful, that alone would pay for the airport's share of the new runway project. East of the runway, once the crosswind runway closes, all of that land will be available for development, either expansion of the industrial park near Crawford Street, new hangars, corporate hangars, T hangars. So this project, again, it's going to be tough for a few years, but it really puts the airport in a good position. And I would also like to point out, Councilor Boschman said that he doesn't have a plane, the airport doesn't benefit him. In 2015, the state did a economic impact study of all 39 public use airports in Massachusetts, and the Fitchburg Airport generates over $14 million a year for the local economy, and indirectly results in 139 jobs. So even if you do not have a plane or you do not fly, that airport does benefit the community.
We have the corporate executives
Yes.
flying in to check on our industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so our future plans are approximately 2020. We're going to expand our runway to 5,000 feet as well.
Correct.
And so that'll be resurfacing the runway and expanding it.
Counselor, I'd like to limit. I know we could go on. Gale and Associates frequently does for hours on end, but there's hours worth of updates in terms of infrastructure, and we could schedule a special time to have the airport come in and do a discussion. So I'd just like to make sure we're talking kind of purely about the financials at this point.
And our financials, that 5,000 foot runway is going to also increase our financial revenue source as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Naylor.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is Jack Naylor, Senior, the Chairman of the Fitchburg Airport Commission, and to Mr. Donnelly, Paul Revere and myself went over what we should be doing many years ago. He just said I was on the council, and I told him 2 by land, 1 by sea, but he got it wrong. But anyway, I just want to say what Councilor Kuzmarek said was true. There was a plan, and the plan prior to that also was a bigger terminal building, but we stood with this one. And we also had a plan for solar fields. That was about 7 years ago, but that did not happen, as you know. But now we have that potential to bring in a solar field. The potential of the plan that was given to us by Gale Associates, which I think everybody that was on the council at that time knows about it. And I think, you know, if you're in business, you have to borrow a little bit to get over that hump. And Councilor Boschman's right, we have been losing money. But that's because of what the IFR landing, because of the trees that were tall and things like that. So, and when you say about paperwork, I have to sign, you know, my life away on these grants and everything. And just one other thing, the last grant that was signed, if I believe, prior to myself in 2008 was 2007. You have to have 20 years, so that would be 2027 before we could do anything to the airport. If you do anything prior to that, we would be fined, and I figured out the last time we would pay about $60 million that we'd have to pay back to the federal government. So, and that would be on the taxpayer. So, you know, the airport's there. One other thing I'd like to bring up, I think Mr. Brooks would know this, that we give $50,000 to the city for incidentals, whatever that may be, and I know what it is. I'm not going to get into it. But a long time ago, when there was a previous mayor, because the city's revenues were going down, he asked that all city departments chip in. And we've been chipping in since, and as the revenues go up in the city, we're still chipping in at $50,000. And that's something that I'd like to see taken out and given back to the airport so we can provide, you know, a couple of more positions at the airport. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Naylor. Councilor Di Natale.
Also,
Councilor Green.
Hi, Mr. Ellis. My question would be in actual fuel costs, FY17, $257,000 and change. FY18 projected $258 and change. Is it detrimental? Like, I look at this as your expense and say, okay, your expense is about the same, but how can we generate revenue from the oil or the aviation fuel that you sell?
We do generate revenue. The profit margin for every gallon of aviation fuel that we sell is roughly about $1.20, and for jet fuel, it's roughly about $1.60. That's for every gallon that we sell. One thing that a previous counselor had brought up at a previous meeting is he wanted to know why our fuel expenses changed so much, fluctuated so much, and the price of fuel changes. On my first day there, we were charging $6.44 a gallon for aviation fuel, and that's gotten as low as $4.95 a gallon. So if fuel is cheaper, then we buy less. If fuel is more expensive, then we spend more. That number fluctuates also. The number of gallons that we sell every year fluctuates based on a lot of factors. For jet fuel, it was the night approach and the loss of the 2 jets at Bullock Charter because of that. Aviation fuel, if we have a long winter, bad winter, a rainy summer, it's going to reduce the number of flying, and it's going to reduce the amount of fuel that we sell. So there's many factors that determine that revenue stream.
Thank you.
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you. In defense of what Councilor Boschman had to do a line item, the former system was a not pleasing way to go through the budget. In this system here, to have to place a line item isn't really a fair way to address a whole problem and make it one line item. I don't know if there is a good way to do it, but if a couple of the councilors didn't put something in, there'd be no meeting, no discussion, no education, no information. So I'm happy that they put them in. In the past, there's been some that have been put in, and we make $1,000 cut, $500 cut, and spend 3 or 4 hours, and it gets voted down anyway. So that's number one. Number two, question, why were the electronics shut off for those approaches?
Well, the electronics aren't shut off. Shut off is just the term that the FAA uses. They were NOTAM'd, which means notice to airmen, not available at night. And shut off is just the industry term. They were shut off because of the vegetative obstructions on the approach. Trees grow. They grew up into the approach. It was a visual and safety issue. So the FAA said that until those trees are removed, then the instruments are their instrument approaches are not available at night.
So my comment would be, we've had these trees growing longer than anybody here is alive, and they grow all the time. So where in the plan, why wasn't that taken care of before the FAA had to come in? Why didn't somebody in Fitchburg see that there was a problem so those things get shut off? People are creatures of habit. And when people start to go to a different place to land and they like that, you lost a customer.
I can answer that. Many of those approaches.
Mr. Ellis, the counselor has the floor. So, sorry.
That's just food for thought, because you wonder about management and why we're not making money, and I don't know where the foresight is. You just brought up a number, I believe it was $14 million of economic benefit for the area. No one has ever narrowed it down for what the economic benefit for Fitchburg is. So that number has never, to my knowledge, ever come up. It's always been the question, but no one's had the answer. And number 4, on the threat of Washington coming in, if this city decided not to support it, is Washington, D.C. going to come in and shut Fitchburg down? Or try to take all the millions that they've donated all these years? Did you ever hear of bankruptcy? There are many cities that have gone bankrupt. I don't recommend that. But the threat of Washington and the FAA coming in and trying to collect all that money, if you're in business or you've known people that are business or follow business, that's a threat. It's preposterous. If you believe Washington, the FAA is going to come in and shut the city down because of all the money donated, they'll find a solution, and it won't be on the shoulders of Fitchburg. There might be a penalty, but there are ways. We should not be under the threat of the FAA and Washington because somebody opened an airport many years ago. That's not how you run a business. There's ways out, and there are ways out. That's ridiculous. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may just answer that real quickly. The contracts were signed to the federal government, and it's 20 years. Now, I gave an estimate of what it would cost. I'm not saying they're going to do it. They did come in. I will tell you one other thing, that if there's any other, and during that time, if there's any other federal projects going on in the city, federal projects, the Department of Transportation that has railroads, they have roads, and they have airports. It's all under one person. And if we do not abide by it, they might not shut the airport down, but they might shut down another federal project in the city. They can do that. Is that a threat? Yeah, of course it is. Are they going to do it? I doubt it. But there has to be another plan. And I think if we just go along with it, we're all going to be better off in the 3 to 5 years that the airport has a plan. That's all.
Councilor Zarella.
First, I'd just like to say that, I would not at all be comfortable gambling on what the federal government will or will not decide to press. They would certainly have every legal right to force us into bankruptcy over these repayment issues. And yeah, they wouldn't collect the full 60 million, would go bankrupt first, but that's not really a direction I want to see Fitchburg go in. And will they actually do it? Maybe not, but it'll still hurt us. They'll still find a way to make their displeasure known. Second of all, it seems like really this is a fairly simple issue when it all boils down. It looks like an expense and a loss, but it's effectively an investment. We're putting money into it now so that we can get money out later. We can afford it, and so unless it starts to look like we're not on track, unless it starts to look like we're not going to recoup our investment, I think we should look ahead. Not make the decision for today, but for the future of Fitchburg. We need to be thinking more than 365 days down the road.
Councillor Di Natale.
I've had to hear 2 times just now critiquing this process. And the reason why the process changed is because these meetings would go into territories that they should not be going into. We're seeing it now. We're not talking about budgetary matters here. This is a presentation by the airport on what they're doing, which we can have done any time of the year, along with their special report. Any counselor in this room has a problem with the budget schedule, take it up with the council president, who coordinates with the city clerk on the schedule. And I can guarantee you, being the honorable man he is, if a majority of us don't like this schedule, he'll probably change it. Or put a petition in if you have a problem.
Don't get me
That
going.
is why this process is the way it is. I'll sit here for 4 hours a night and go over numbers. We want to go over numbers? I'll go over numbers. But these meetings never talk about numbers. They go about personnel management, operational management. Why isn't this sidewalk done? Why isn't this happening? That's not the point of these meetings. So instead of taking veiled shots at the president for the way the schedule's been developed, speak to him if you have a problem. And let's keep it to budget matters, please. Maybe that's why the schedule changed, because this becomes a free-for-all. And I'm guilty of it too sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Di Natale. And the councillor's comment about eliciting feedback, I do so at the end of each year's budget process. Later on this summer, I'll be reaching out to each and every one of you to gain feedback. And certainly, if I'm the president next year, I'll incorporate that feedback and act in the will of the council and the majority of the council, or show that feedback and share that feedback with the next president. So, that is my pledge that I gave to you last year, which I've done this year, and I will plan to do so again. For the time being, this is the process that we have and that has been selected. And this is what we're operating with. Said, Councillor Caddy.
I was just going to ask what the subject matter was we were talking about.
$50,000 cut, that's what the subject matter is.
I'll make a motion to approve the cut of $52,624.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut of $52,624 to the administrative assistant airport line. Speaking to the motion, Councillor Scalia.
I'd just like to note that, Council President, you did note in the beginning that you would give the councilor that proposed the cut the opportunity to propose the motion, but that's not happened yet with Councilor Boschman's motions. That's all.
Councillor Boschman, just as any other councillor sitting around this table, may make a motion. I certainly encouraged him to do so earlier, and the opportunities available to anyone. Every councillor around this table, except for myself, has the ability to make a motion at any time. Councillor Boschman, speaking to the motion.
Councillors, I know I make some cuts here, and I know I make some unpleasant cuts, and people don't like them. But we're talking about the taxpayers' money. Now, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to ask all of you, donate me $1,000, because I want to play Mass Lottery tomorrow night, and my chances of winning are great. Great. I can feel it. But there's no guarantee. We're talking about in investments. We're talking about the taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money. Now, they're predicting out in the future. I work for General Electric. And the manager at General Electric works for the shareholders. I work for the shareholders in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. The homeowners. They don't want to pay. They want them to pay. They don't want to subsidize them. Like all businesses. If it was your business, if it was your business, if it was his business. If you weren't making money, you would find ways to cut down. Even if the future looks rosy, because you couldn't swing it. There's no guarantee that they're going to improve. Only what they tell us, and only what Mr. President tells me. But there's no guarantee. So if they do improve, if they do, and I hope they do, if whatever we do, if we cut the position or we make cutbacks, we can always add them in the future. We can always add them in the future. So why not take that route? Add it when they improve. Why wait? If it was your business, you would do it. But you know when that checkbook comes out and it's not your money? Oh boy, let's write that check and give it over here. Because it's not my money. But damn, if it was, I'm just as tight as anybody else. I don't want to spend a nickel either. And we're wrong because they're showing a deficit. That's what they're showing, a deficit. And we should do something about it. That is our job. So that's all I have to say.
Councilor Zarella.
First of all, I'd just like to note that a 5-year strategic plan is a bit different than gambling on the lottery. It's not, 1,000,000 to 1 odds. This is projections by intelligent and knowledgeable people. We have, at the moment, every reason to expect that it's going to play out the way it's planned. Secondly, I am a fiscal conservative. I don't like spending taxpayers' money either. But this isn't about cutting a bloated department. This is our only real options with when we're hearing that the airport is already pared down to its minimal functional level. Our options are continue to fund it and get a return on our investment down the road, or effectively guarantee that it will fail. There comes a point when you're managing a business where, yes, if you're running in the red, you need to look for things to cut, but there are certain things that you can't cut without guaranteeing that you'll never get back into the black. If you cut your last worker, the company's dead. You can't say, oh, well, I'm the manager, I'm still here. If you're not the one doing the work, your company's dead. So if we can't cut money from the airport now and put it back later. If we cut it now, there will be no airport later. And then we run into the issues with the federal government. Whatever they may decide to do, it certainly won't be pleasant. And we're out an airport. And we're out whatever revenues we may be able to expect down the road. If this were a situation where the airport employees had, really cushy offices and bloated salaries and whatnot, I'd be asking for a cut. But that's not the situation we're in.
Councilor Fleming.
Just a quick comment. We're 3 years into a 5-year plan, and we are all taxpayers sitting at this table. That's all I want to say.
Councilor Di Natale.
I try to control myself at these meetings, but, I have to hear people tell me about cutting cost. You look at the last 10 years of this department, they have nowhere to reduce. I know this budget like my own life. There's nowhere to cut in here. if there was a place, I'd find it. It's not in there. Now, they've explained why they're in the position they're in. This department has been mismanaged well before Mr. Ellis's time, as we all know. Unfortunately for them, unlike the wastewater and the water departments, who can come to us for rate increases to solve problems they have either structurally or capital-wise, they don't have that luxury. Their budget runs strictly on market sales. Now, the statement was made that they're running a deficit. For FY19's proposal, they are not running a deficit. They are even, just like every year they're proposed to be even. You can't have an enterprise fund, which this essentially is, in a deficit before the budget comes to us. They have to base their budget based on the revenues they take in. If they can't get the revenues, they can't spend the money. So the budget being proposed is a balanced budget. Now, in fiscal year 18, yes, they are running into the red. That is not without a debate looking at this latest Status E report through May. They're running into the red. Projection I have on my calculations is around $80,000. And they've explained why that's happening. As Councilor Zarella said, it's not because of we have 45 people over there who are sitting around playing, playing games or whatever. There is nowhere to cut in this budget. Their budget is largely, entirely dependent on revenues. And there are market forces right now that are hurting them, but it's not because they're bloated. So when those market forces correct itself, and when we get another update from them on, well, you said it was all because of this, and that's gone now, and if they're still running into the red, then I'll start to get my attention very seriously. But they've provided detailed explanations why it's happening. And I can't discount the many years before this gentleman's time when that department was run into the sewer. So I don't want to do it any more than anybody else does. But for right now, the plan is to be one-for-one revenues and expenses. They're not doing well this year, and they've explained why. Let's see how they do next year and the year after that. And if this continues, then we have a right to be very concerned and upset about it, because then they run out of excuses. But looking at this budget very closely, as I've done, there is nowhere to cut in this budget. If there was, I would have proposed something. I mean, look at the cuts that I've proposed tonight. They're pennies on the dollar. But there's a reason behind them, because they're so blatantly clear. Nothing in here is blatantly clear. Thank you.
I have a motion and second.
President, on the motion.
On the motion, Councilor
On the
Boschman.
motion, in regards to Councilor Dinatelli saying, next week at the next financial meeting, we have an appropriation of $100 and some odd thousand to take them out of the red. It's coming in front of us next week. We have to approve it. My question is this, sir, and I'm not attacking anybody, and everybody thinks I'm going after somebody. I'm not going after anybody. But the problem I'm having, and again I repeat, the problem I'm having, if you run a business properly, no matter what you project, you want it profitable. So if you can't get it profitable, you're not running profitable, you make cuts. And if you have to make cuts, then everybody tidies up and does extra work. That's what I'm saying. And that's all I'm saying. I don't care if you don't cut that position, but make cuts. Make the cuts. Christ, their fuel has gone down every year.
Councilor Boschman, I just suggest you've referenced a Fortune 100 company all night in General Electric who runs calculated deficits almost every year through different divisions. Calculated deficits are a part of business. You set a plan and you operate within it. This does not deviate from the plan. We haven't extended beyond the plan. That's all I'll say. Councilor Dinatelli.
Very quickly, there's 32 line items on this page for expenses. If people in this room feel that strongly about it, put your money where your mouth is and tell us where you want the $50,000 be cut by line item. Don't just say, I want $50,000 cut, I don't care where it comes from. No. Well, you made the recommendation, you pick the line items. The reason why the line items aren't picked is because there's nowhere to cut. That's why the line items weren't selected.
Did make the line item.
Councilor Boschman, you do not have the floor.
Oh, sorry.
But the explanation was we're just going to take a position because it happens to be around $50,000. That doesn't cut it for me, even if it was a legitimate cut. Pick the actual line items you want to cut. You want to get rid of electricity? Let's get rid of electricity. You want to get rid of groundskeeping or equipment rental or motor vehicle repair maintenance? Let's get rid of it.
I have a motion and second to accept the cut. All those in favor?
I'm in favor of that.
One in favor. All those opposed? 9 in opposition. Motion fails to carry. Councilors, just a procedural. This past proposed cut, ventured well beyond the parameters of the cut that was in front of us. I'd just like to ask that we dial it back in and focus on both the financials, not the operations, the financials of the specific line item that is before us. That said, Councilor Di Natale, the next several cuts are proposed by you. The first is City Council, Education and Travel, original amount $3,000, proposed reduction of $1,500 for a proposed new amount of $1,500. Councilors in public, this is on page 7. Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. President. My cuts are very small in nature, and there's a reason for that. This is a methodical move on my part, looking at the last 10 years of fiscal data. Every one of these cuts you see, it's for the same reason. I believe there's some fat in these accounts. As small as they are, they jump out at me like, they just jump out at me. And what I looked at is the last 10 years of spending data, but more importantly, the last 3 or 4. And I look at what these are continuously budgeted at, and I look at what we're spending in them, and I consider them to be a little bit overstated. And I'd like to pare them down a little bit. And I will note that every one of these cuts, with the exception of the first one, is, even if those cuts pass, it's still an increase over last fiscal year. I am reducing an increase over what they spent the prior fiscal years. So if a budget is $3,000 and they spend continuously $1,500, I'm advocating get cut from $3,000 to $2,000. I'm still leaving $500 of fat in there. But that's the motivation behind these cuts. Even with most of them going through, there's still more money in those accounts than what they've spent. Because I don't want to cut obviously below what they've spent. But to start in the first one, $1,500. I've gone to battle over this account for 3 years now. It's a newer account, and it's always been funded at $1,500. I myself have never used this account, not decrying any one of us that have used the account. You're free to because it's in there. But it's being doubled now. And in this fiscal year, I know in FY17 we spent $2,000. This fiscal year we spent $1,223, and we're projected to spend $1,334. I think doubling the account is excessive, and I'd like to understand why it was doubled. At the very least, usually I'd cut this entirely, but I'd like to keep it at the levels it's at right now because I haven't seen a need to go beyond that.
Councilor, happy to speak to this. The mayor did this at my request, put in for $3,000. So last year we spent a little over $2,000. So there's for everyone, including the new councilors, is a professional development line account, if you will. This provides for travel, account expenses, as well as professional development. So this year, for example, it's typically always done on a first-come, first-served basis. The count was essentially exhausted before new councilors even came in. I couldn't even offer to extend the opportunity out to 4 new councilors who joined our ranks this year. This has also typically been helping to fund the ability for us to attend the Tri-City City Council, to meet and network with our fellow delegates from sister cities. So in order to be able to not just do it on a first-come, first-served basis, because typically not every councilor, in my time as president, I've had to deny several councilors because the fund is empty by the end of the year when their particular professional development opportunity comes about. So, what I'd like to be able to do is have enough funding in the account for each councilor to be able to pursue at least one opportunity throughout the year. Typically, they average in that ballpark of, anywhere from $150 to $500, depending on the opportunity, but typically an average is about $300. And this would allow us to, for the most part, to each avail ourselves of one professional development opportunity. And again, in a year where we have 4 new counselors, you should be able to take advantage of that opportunity. I know I do it in my professional life. I take advantage of a good deal of professional development to increase my my area of expertise in a particular subject, or to understand something that I might not feel particularly comfortable with. I know City Auditor Brooks has talked to me about, there's a wonderful opportunity in the future, talking about municipalities our size and the budgeting process. That would be a good opportunity to extend out. I couldn't do that this year because we didn't have available funding. So certainly, I appreciate Councilor Di Natale taking a look at the past record of this. You're right, we haven't spent more than that. Typically, it's been an underutilized account, but the past 3 years, we've shown that we've spent 2 or just about above. If we're not using these funds, by all means, we should return back to that amount. And maybe after we've gone through a year or two of new councilors, maybe we cycle back down to $1,500, and that's adequate. But I think this at least provides us that opportunity to do so moving forward. Councilor Squalia?
I, too, looked at the education and travel, and I had it highlighted, like, what are we spending money for education and travel on for the city council? And after I spoke with Auditor Brooks, he said, oh, you don't want to cut that. These are options, just like you said, on professional development, and this would even allow you to go to, like, the Mass Municipal Association conference, where us as city councilors can learn different strategies of what everyone else in the state of Massachusetts is doing. And I know myself, I was thinking about going to that, but the $175 price tag, I was like, nah, I have other things that I can do instead. But if the city offered the $175, for example, to attend that conference, then I know that I would have benefited from that. And in my benefiting from that, we all benefit from that. All our councilors benefit from that. So I don't plan on cutting this line item. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I have certainly been a councilor that I believe for every year that I've sat on council have, I don't want to say taken advantage of, but I have made opportunities available to request money for professional development when it comes to the council work. So I know that I myself have been denied when it gets to be towards the end of the fiscal year on that. So I'm an advocate for that, because I do believe that the more that we can educate ourselves, the better we all are. So I will always plan on keeping that fund available for us. Thank you.
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you. I would defend keeping the money up. Sometimes people may think I am a bit arrogant, and I think some of the arrogance comes from attending some of these seminars over the course of many, many years. And sometimes I'm upset. I try to talk to people or with people at their level, but sometimes I sound like I might be a little bit above. But it frustrates me that so many people don't take advantage of these educational opportunities. And when someone does take advantage of them and tries to bring it back to the council, sometimes I get looked on the wrong way, because I am trying to speak from, not because it's not from me. I'm passing the message through from many things that I've gone through, different seminars. And Mass Municipal is probably the one. You can pick, there are 20 or 30 different things that you can pick up and go to. And if everybody brought something back, 3,000 wouldn't cover it if everybody wanted to do it. So, my frustration is I wish there was more money and more people used it. So I would keep it at the 3,000. Thank you.
With each vote, we exercise our power and authority as elected officials, and I'd like to think that we're all doing it from the most educated and experienced level possible. This provides us some of that opportunity, and I think particularly the increase will at least allow us to avail for each city councilor to avail themselves of that opportunity. If we don't use it, certainly then I'd be the first to.
Motion to approve the cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor? 1-4. All those in opposition? 9 in opposition. Motion fails. Next is assessor chairman stipend, $1,500. Proposed reduction in its entirety to a new proposed amount of $0, and this is on page 11.
This was recommended, Mr. President, very quickly because we don't have a chief assessor anymore, so why would we need to pay a stipend if we have a contract services doing chief assessing work? Why do we have a stipend still?
Mr. Trigney, can you speak to this?
Well,
or Mr. Mayor?
This is regulated by ordinance. So you would.
Well, we don't have a chief assessor.
May I, Councilor, the chairman's stipend is an annual vote of the Board of Assessors for chairman spot. So currently, we do not have a chair to the Board of Assessors. He retired. We have two appointments, and a vote for the chairmanship hasn't happened yet. We're waiting for another individual to come in to be appointed, and then that chair would receive that stipend, unless, of course, that is an ordinance change.
So before we had 3 people on the board, it was the chief assessor, one of the administrators, and then the other assessor.
Yes, sir.
Those were the 3. Now that we have 2 full-time assessors and a contractor who is the chief assessor, you said we're going to wait to bring someone on to the board, and they will pick a chairperson.
The intention is to, when we hire a contracted service, to come on to on contract with the city of Fitchburg, the mayor will appoint someone from that department or that service to be part of the Board of Assessors. Then you have 3 Board of Assessors, then they meet in.
Let's assume the RIG RRG is hired, and the gentleman who's doing the work right now on behalf of them is still there.
Mm-hmm.
He would
Sure.
probably be appointed to this board,
Yes, sir.
and if he got chosen as chairman, we'd be giving him the $1,500 on top of the $150,000 we're already giving them.
No, I think we would have to do an ordinance change.
Right. My question is, if we reduce this to 0, I mean, I'll file the petition tomorrow to remove the chairman's stipend. I mean, if that's an ordinance that we put in, we can easily take it out. If it's not contractual, I'm going to file it tomorrow. I mean, so I think this should be done, especially, correct me if I'm wrong, historically, the board has chosen the chief assessor as the board chairman.
Part of our ordinance, correct. Our ordinance says that the chair would serve as part of the finance and administration of the mayor. So,
yeah, okay. So I feel like there is a high probability that the contractor will be selected chairperson, and they're going to be getting a $1,500 stipend when they're already on contract for $150,000. Makes no sense to me.
Motion to approve the cut.
We're not opposed.
Second.
On the motion?
On the motion, Councilor Donnelly.
Speaking on the motion, we have a couple of lawyers here. It sounds like some people think that they're going to say who the chair is.
well,
And that is between the 2 or 3 people that are on the board by state law, not Fitchburg ordinance. The assessor retired in January,
yeah, yes.
and they didn't take a vote yet. There's 2 people there. I mean, 6 months to take a vote. Who's going to be the chair? I support Councilor Di Natale's petition. It doesn't make sense. And then you're going to make the part-time person the chair?
Councilor Zarella.
If, in fact, the ordinance requires that we pay the chair the stipend, and there is no contractual obligation to pay the stipend, I would be in favor of an ordinance change, though perhaps because the because the chief does not have to be appointed chair, I would maybe suggest that we change the ordinance to say that the stipend only goes to the chair if it is a city employee. But that's not really the issue before us at the moment. I would say that we should maybe hold off on cutting the line item because we haven't actually passed that ordinance change yet. I know it looks like we're all in favor of it, maybe, but I'm leery about the idea of not funding something that is, at this moment, a statutory obligation of ours. Whereas if we fund it and then we change the ordinance, there's no reason we can't have the finance committee just decide to roll that money back into the general fund later this year. Is there any reason we couldn't do that?
That would be the process. The mayor would file an order to move the funds. Correct. Councilor Di Natale.
It's not unlawful to remove something that's in an ordinance. We've done it before. The budget is a legally binding document too, but we've done it before. So, but the other piece of this is, the contractor that's on board solidifies my position on this even more so, but way back when we instituted this new ordinance, I voted against it. I didn't like the ordinance, I didn't like the stipend anyway. I mean, if you're hired to be a chief assessor, either roll into the salary, that's part of your job function. None of this stipend stuff. Okay. I mean, that's how I felt then. I still feel the same way, whether it's a full-time person or contractor, but now that there's a contractor who could potentially be the chief person, I'm really against it. And I don't think it's unlawful to remove it prior to an ordinance change, because we've done that before, and the budget itself is a legally binding document, too.
Counselor, to further your point, I just confirmed with Auditor Brooks that, if any of those potential proposed cuts to positions had gone through, that would have been an ordinance that said we fund a position and then us not funding it. So, the budget process is a way of reinforcing or not the ordinance. So I don't see a procedural issue here where we wouldn't be setting a precedent as a council, and the same could simply be true if at some point we do, if a city employee does end up being selected, we could then simply fund this position with a $1,500 allocation from elsewhere. So I'd support this as well. I have a motion and second to accept the proposed cut of $1,500. All those in favor of the cut? It is 10 in favor. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Cut passes. Next is assessor travel and meetings. Original amount $3,000. Proposed reduction of $1,500 for a proposed new amount of $1,500. And this is again on page 11.
The next two are similar.
I'll read that as well. That's also assessor line item travel in state. Original amount $3,600. Proposed reduction of $1,100 for proposed new amount of $2,500.
So travel and meetings, I've proposed cuts of this nature for a very long time. Specifically the travel and meetings. We have incurred costs in this account on average $700 over 10 years. And this account just keeps getting funded at $3,000, and it's never used. There is 1 or 2 years in the 10-year period where there's a blip, but the biggest blip was in FY15, where they spent $1,600, only half the budget. So I don't know why we continue to fund it at again, small dollars, I know, but it just really bothers me that when I see an account that's never over a certain number, I start to question if it's really needed, because no one's stopping anybody from traveling. So, I suggested cutting it in half to a level that's more commensurate with what they've spent. This fiscal year alone, they've only spent $450, $364 in FY17, $1,000 in FY16. So that's all. That's the same logic applies to the next one as well. Same logic.
Motion to approve the...
Mr. Tregney, second. Before.
Just very quickly, to the councilor's credit, with the change in the staff organization in the assessing department, the travel in state and the travel in meetings theoretically would be reduced in half because of no longer having a direct employee, but rather contracted. So that change is welcome.
I have a motion and second to cut both the travel and meetings in the amount of $1,500 and travel in state in the amount of $1,100. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor of the cut, please raise your hand. 10 in favor. It is unanimous. Next is building. Line item of overtime, original amount $13,000, proposed reduction of $3,000 for a proposed new amount of $10,000. Councilors, this is on page 33. Mr. Barbadoro, thank you for joining us.
Mr. President.
Councilor Ginatelli.
I believe I wasn't thinking clearly when I made this recommendation. I will have to recuse myself from this discussion, considering I'm related to an employee in the office that may use this account.
Councilor, we will. Are you recusing yourself from the next two, or just this particular?
No, just this one.
Understood.
Just this one in personal services.
We'll come out and get you afterwards.
I'd like to make a motion that you can't hold this hearing at all. They'll cut my budget.
Mr. Barbadari, we can't have a councilor speak to why this cut was proposed, but if you would just speak to the potential impact or the proposed cut.
Okay. Well, to begin with, there's three separate cuts that are being proposed?
I'll have you speak just specifically to the overtime, if you would, because Councilor Di Natale will rejoin us for the next two.
Okay. I've been here for 1 year just about, so thank you, City of Fitchburg, for hiring me. And thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councilors.
Don't mention it.
So, I have this year proposed, or actually a request from the library to replace a ceiling fan. Actually, it's a bathroom fan. That's going to take, if I do it out of my overtime with my wiring inspector, that's going to take 3 or 4 hours. A request from the mayor's office to energize the podium that's going to be relocated. That's also 3 to 4 hours. The bathroom fan's also going to incur some parts. Outlets at Gateway Park to be replaced, 3 to 4 hours. Hand dryers at Park Hill Park, estimated 3 to 4 hours. Today, in the middle of the day, the ladies' bathroom sink broke. All of these things get fixed by my staff, and they do it at overtime. If I, 2 weeks ago, had authorized all this work to be done and it had all been done, then I don't think Councilor Di Natale would be requesting the cut, because he's trying to make sure we don't cut more than I had expended, and that would have pushed my expenditure over. And my point is with that is that these are things that are not unforeseen, they're sort of planned unforeseen. We know that things are going to break. We know that there's going to be some wiring that needs to be done in the city, some plumbing, some gas work. A long time ago, the city had a city plumber, a city electrician, a city gas fitter, and those departments were cut and when there was leaner times. But now I think that it's cheaper for me to do this, like fix the sink with that versus contracted services. I think it's actually a benefit to the city to do it. So this is going to fluctuate. It's also going to fluctuate because we also are an emergency responder. So when someone drives a car into a building in the middle of winter, we come out and assess the situation. And that's done on overtime. Last year, I did the winter myself instead of my staff because I was having some union negotiations. That's a lot of the reason why the overtime budget hasn't been really spent very much. But I think it's going to be spent a lot more moving forward.
So am I understanding correctly, it seems like with the latest work that you just read off in the beginning of your statement, we'll be getting close to that $13,000 full allocation just this year. Great, thank you. Councilor Green.
My question specifically to that is, why would it essentially have to come out of an overtime budget when there's a City Hall maintenance, repair, and care line item to allow for such expenses like that to be covered?
My understanding, and it's pretty shaky,
Even better, right?
Take my overtime and spend it out of the repair and care budget. I have to spend it out of my allotted overtime budget. But maybe Calvin can speak to that.
If I could just respond to that, Councilor. If city employees are doing the work, the payment should be made out of personal services accounts, which is the overtime account. The City Hall repair and care is an expense account, which is used for outside contractors or for the parts and materials that our employee is using to make the repair that they're doing. So we differentiate between what's a
one is for
payroll
the
item,
supplies and one is for the
what's
hours.
payroll and what's an expense.
Right. But, okay, so during the course of the day, and this is not a criticism, but during the course of a day, you essentially would have to pull the plumbing inspector off of a inspection outside of City Hall to come in and do the work.
That's right.
Wouldn't do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you. I think to answer that, he wouldn't pull them off an inspection because that was already, there was an appointment with a plumber and a homeowner or business. He would have to do the inspection. When the inspection was over, and it was whenever time he's off from the inspections, this is an unanticipated repair. And what I do every day is unanticipated repairs. So I know very well. I'd like to make a motion that we support the cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Speaking to the motion, Councillor Squally, are you all set?
I would like to speak, yeah.
Councillor Squally.
So a lot of the overtime that you noted some are emergency response, but a lot of the overtime noted is for fixing, like the bathroom fan, energizing a podium, fixing the outlets at the Gateway Park, and you noted it was going to be approximately 3 to 4 hours for each. Can you give me the approximate value of cost of personal services for those items? For what's 3 to 4 hours for a wire inspector?
Hate to say it, but I don't really even know off the top of my head. It is going to be time and a half, so I'm maybe Calvin knows what his rate is. But I
Okay,
don't.
so beyond just the specifics, I don't really need to know the specifics. It's more like, can we hire outside service? Can we hire an electrician to fix that bathroom fan at the library?
We can. That comes out at a electrician's prevailing wage. There'll be minimum mobilization costs, and there'll be markups on the materials.
Because we're paying a government entity, we're paying prevailing wage regardless.
Well, we're not paying Kyle prevailing wage. So when he does it, he's getting time and a half, but it isn't time and a half at prevailing wage.
That's why you estimate that it might be more inexpensive for us to do it in-house and pay the overtime.
Councillor, to answer
budget.
your questions, it's approximately $50 an hour, a little over $50 an hour for overtime expenses. Councillor Zarella. Are you?
Could I respond to Councillor
may.
Squalia? Just think for a minute about me saying to Wayne at 4:30, Wayne, the plumbing inspector, spend a half an hour fixing the bathroom sink at time and a half. Or think of me hiring contract services with a minimum mobilization cost of 4 to 6 hours to come out at prevailing wage to fix the sink. That's why I think it's cheaper.
Thank you.
In terms of just pure hourly alone, you'd pay far more than I believe it's $52.50 an hour with overtime. That's far below the typical prevailing wage. Even it's far below what you pay your your own cousin to do it. So, Councillor Zarella.
Now, I understand what you're saying about it being cheaper. Makes perfect sense. I am just trying to understand the concept here of why in particular, I'm sure there is a good reason, I just want to understand what it is, why it gets billed at time and a half, even if it's during the workday.
The reason it's is at time and a half is because right now those of you who are in the business or building buildings have noticed that the economy is roaring right now. And all of the staff are very, very busy right now. They're working at full steam. So they don't have the free time to do, they're not sitting around doing nothing. And actually, I invite you guys to walk through their cubicles and take a look and see if you see them either in their cubicles or in their cubicles doing nothing. And if they're doing nothing, please let me know.
Yes, thank you. I suspected that it was absolutely that because I've seen exactly how busy your department is. For those who don't know, I work with his department fairly frequently in my role on the zoning board, but I wanted to get that on the record for anyone who might be questioning that.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you. I just want to verify that you cannot get a tradesman for those wages, time and a half. And if you could, the inconvenience, I mean, to try and make a phone call and that person has an obligation somewhere else, it's the most efficient way to get the help also.
I have a motion and second. Speaking on the motion, Councillor Boschman.
My question to you, what is the rate of the prevailing wages? You don't know?
I don't know, I'm sorry.
Okay. Now, the second question I have is, what happens if Wayne Little says, no, I don't want to fix that bathroom sink?
Then I can't make him do it because it's not in his job description to do plumbing for the city. So I would hire contracted services to do it. And I have a budget for that, the repair and care of City Hall budget, which we'll be discussing in a minute.
Councillor, I know the last time I had an electrician quote me, it was $95 an hour.
How much?
$95 an hour.
Oh, that's because you're rich.
Councillor Boschman, I assure you that's not the case. Councillor Caddy.
So I just want to make a comment. I don't think Kyle or Wayne would ever refuse to do something. They're both great guys, and Wayne, I haven't had so much with Kyle, but I have, but Wayne has been there every time there's a problem. Wayne shows up.
They are great
You couldn't
guys.
have two better employees.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor of the cut? All those in opposition to the cut? Motion fails. 0 to 10. Councilor Tinatelli is now with us again. The next, take the next two together, unless there's any concerns. We'll do building. First is City Hall maintenance, repair, and care. Original amount of $25,200. Proposed reduction of $10,200. Proposed new amount of $15,000. The second is building, City Hall maintenance, supplies, household. Original amount of $12,500. Proposed reduction of $2,500. Proposed new amount of $10,000. Both are on page 34, councilors. If we need, we can take separate votes, but we can speak to both of these jointly. Councilor Dinatelli.
Yeah, so this budget is at $25,200. We're projected to spend $9,000 this year, spent $11,500 in FY17, $7,800 in FY16, and then 15 we had a little bit of an uptick because we were I don't recall exactly what the uptick was for, but it was still $10,000 less than what we're budgeted at. Now, when I made this cut, I didn't want it to be perceived by the public to think that I want to get rid of expenses for maintaining City Hall. This account was created to maintain the current facility we're at right now. And all I'm saying is, this is one of those accounts that I'm not crazy about, although I understand it because it's almost as an ad-needed basis. And just because we haven't spent the money in a few years doesn't mean we may not need it this year. We just haven't had to use it, thank God. But, you know, if we're still going to be in that current facility next fiscal year, unless there's some major issues that we know about now that haven't been addressed, I don't know why we continuously fund this number at 25.2 for the last two fiscal years, when we're not even coming close to spending that money. I mean, and you know, when I make these cuts, I'm not so much recommending the cut be taken out of building entirely, put it to something else that the building department may need, but it just jumps out at me that we haven't even come close to using 50% of this account in the last 3 years. So I don't understand why it keeps getting funded at the same level.
Commissioner Barbadara.
Well,
and the same logic applies for the next one. I won't go into full speech on that either. Same thing.
Well, I would actually be interested in the idea of moving some of that money to a different account, because there's I have an account, and Calvin knows which one it is, money that I spend for putting up chain link fences, boarding up buildings, knocking buildings down, and I last year used up almost all the last of the money in the revolving fund that I had to knock buildings down, and we aren't refunding that account. So I'm interested in when emergencies arise, being able to act quickly on them. I agree that we should probably not be spending money on a building that we're going to be moving out of soon, but included in that could be moving expenses when we do move. Insofar as, so we're talking about both accounts at the same time. The other one is building maintenance other. Now, we've had we've taken on the Bank of America building, which is new, and we basically mothballed it, shut it down, minimal heat and no electricity. When we begin to rebuild City Hall, that building's going to have to come back to life first, because that's going to be the base of operations, instead of spending money on trailers and things like that for the clerk of the works and the OPM and so on. So that money is going to start being spent more in the repair care other.
Councilor Dinatelli.
Mr. Barbadaro, so are you saying that you would like that money to actually be allocated to tax possession maintenance, which is a line item in your budget, tax possession maintenance? Or what would be the account that you would use the boarding up and the?
I believe that was the, sorry to interrupt you,
not tax possession
on
maintenance.
page 33. the non-city buildings.
Okay.
Miscellaneous expense.
Okay. Now, just so everybody's clear, we can only cut, we can't add. I mean, the council can make a recommendation to the mayor that if we free up that $10,000, that he allocate it to where Mr. Barbadaro would like it to go. I mean, it's a leap of faith, but I would hope that would be the case. But, and I'll just come out and say right now that, you know, I understand the explanation on the supplies household, so I wouldn't be against, I'm probably going to vote against that, even though I recommended it, just based on the explanation. But I will be supporting the cut of $10,200 out of the supply city hall, because I don't see us moving out of city hall next year, correct? New city hall is not going to be fully built and operational by the end of fiscal year 19. I'd be shocked if the answer were yes.
Right, probably not.
Okay.
Mayor, can I put you on the spot and just ask, would you, if a cut were to be made here, would you reallocate it to the other aforementioned account?
Certainly.
Okay.
Motion to approve the cut.
Yep.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. We're going to do these singularly. Motion to approve the cut of, Counselor, I haven't finished reading this yet, but motion to approve the cut from City Hall maintenance, repair, and care in the amount of $10,200 to a proposed new amount of $15,000. Speaking to the motion, Counselor Squalia.
Just to clarify, the City Hall maintenance, repair, and care budget of $25,200, you could take from that to prepare the Bank of America building as our base of operations for the rebuilding of the...
I think repair and care other is the money that is the next line item down. That's the one that I'm saying we'll probably be spending more next year because the Bank of America building will suddenly become inhabited. It'll be heated, air-conditioned, lit, and so on.
We'll take that vote next.
Yeah, and that vote will come next.
Well, there's supplies household, and then there's repair and care.
So I think the supply
household is where you're doing this.
Is Old City Hall. So that would be the money.
Repair and care is Boulder, where we are.
Supply household would be for Bank of America and City Hall.
Right.
So you'd be able to take from that $12,500 for the Bank of America building.
I'm proposing that we take repair and care of City Hall. I hope maybe we're saying the same thing. and
Right, you'd like to allocate the City Hall maintenance and repair budget, but I'm questioning, you can use the supplies household to prepare the Bank of America building as a base of operations for the owner's project manager.
Yes.
We could.
Okay, thank you.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. All those in favor? All those in opposition? One in opposition. Motion carries. 9 to 1. Sorry, motion fails, 1 to 9. Next was the building, City Hall maintenance, supplies, household. What's that?
No.
Well, it was 9-1.
It passed. I apologize. It passed 9 to 1. So used to these failing, I just assumed it did. Thank you for catching that. So next is building, City Hall maintenance, supplies, household, original amount $12,500, proposed reduction $2,500. Proposed
Motion
new
to
amount,
approve the $2,500 cut.
Motion to approve. Motion and second to approve the $2,500 cut. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor? All those opposed? Is it? Yeah.
Unanimously opposed.
Unanimously
Okay,
opposed.
right, thanks.
Motion fails. Next is employee benefits, Medicare tax, original amount $1 million, proposed reduction $20,000, proposed new amount $980,000. Counselors on page 39. Counselor Gianni.
This is just a recommendation to reduce the account, reduce the rate of growth in the account. We're running at about, my apologies, I'm not at the page. We're projected to spend about $900,000 in that account this year. And so, as I said earlier at the start of this, that if we accept the cut I'm recommending, it'll still be $80,000 higher than it is this fiscal year, and we're projected to spend $900,000. So I'm recommending it be reduced, the rate of growth be reduced. It's going up by $50,000, and I'm proposing only go up by 30, which is still more than this fiscal year's budget, but not as much as what the mayor's proposing. I'd like to take a wait-and-see approach on that, and I know it's probably based on a calculation, but
Auditor Brooks, if you would.
Can I speak to that?
Of course.
Thank you. There are two things that drive the increase on this account. One is, this is the account for the city's share of the Medicare tax. So our employees pay a Medicare tax of 1.45%, and the city matches it. There are two things that drive the growth. One is the growth in salaries. So if you figure we're doing 1 or 2%, that's the growth. The second thing is an increase in the number of people covered by the Medicare tax. Any city employee hired prior to April of 1986 does not pay the Medicare tax, and so the city does not have a matching share to that. As those people retire, they are being replaced by new people who are required to pay the Medicare tax, and the city has to match that tax. I did a
It's just a wake-up call.
I guess so.
Be careful now, right?
It wasn't me having a moment, huh?
That's right, it wasn't you.
I do a calculation to say, all right, if we were paying on the full payroll, what would that be? So I took the 2017 calendar year earnings, increased it 2% to get to FY18 and another 2% to get to FY19 times the tax rate. And I came up with a figure of about $1,090,000. So if all of our employees were paying, I figured our cost would be $1,090,000. This year for FY18, we had budgeted $950,000, so I bumped it up $50,000. I think we're going to be closer to the $950,000 this year because we're actually paying 3 payrolls in June and a balloon payroll. So I think we're going to be closer to the $950,000, and so then I went up $50,000 to go to $1 million.
Councilor Giannicelli.
I didn't appreciate the first comment you made about when salaries go up, so does this account in correlation to the increase in salaries. Is that what you said at the start of it? That
basically that if
drives it.
That's one of the things that drives it.
Yep.
That if this total salaries, but the total payroll goes up 2%, the tax will go up 2% as well.
Okay. Okay.
Councilor Green.
So if we reduce the million by the 20,000 and still leave you 980, will, according to your calculations, we will still be able to make that payment, correct? We'll still have money in there to make our obligated payments.
Based on my estimate, I think we'd be short, but that's it. It kind of depends on because it depends on retirements and hires. There's a factor in there that's hard to easily project.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'm trying to project on the
motion
higher side just to make sure we're covered.
Councilor Caddy.
Oh, sorry.
Calvin,
Yes, sir.
this isn't something that you'd pay in a lump sum. Is this done quarterly, done monthly?
This is paid per payroll. Our payroll is sufficient that we have to have those funds into the Treasury, I believe, next day, isn't it? And
Well, 5 is the longest, I don't know, maybe.
we do it the same day.
So bi-weekly, you're paying
We pay bi-weekly. Whenever we have a payroll,
If we
make a payment.
reduce this by 20 and you were short by 20 grand, we wouldn't see that until next June sometime.
June, right.
And we could allocate the money.
We could.
Did you make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the $20,000 cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept the $20,000 cut to Medicare tax for a proposed new amount of $980,000. All those in favor of the cut? 1. All those in opposition to the cut? 9. Motion fails. Next is the next 3 cuts. We'll exclude the one to the assessors that was already voted on. The next 3 cuts were made by proposed by Councilor Squalia. First is general fund revenue taxation, line item add 2.5%. Original amount of $1,287,127. Proposed reduction of $62,000 for proposed new amount of $1,225,127. Councillor Squalia.
As I've been speaking with constituents, the number one and number two complaints are the taxes and the roads. And so I would like to see the city not raise our taxes the full legal amount that we can raise it, and instead cut and rely on growth, economic growth. And so I proposed a small, I believe it was approximately 1/8% to the 2.5% increase levy. And it's more of a symbolic cut than anything, but, the constituents complain about the taxes going up. And when we are, when we're also raising their residential tax rate in order to compensate for our split tax rate that we're lowering for the commercial, I felt this was an appropriate cut to our revenue.
Mr. Brooks, do you want to speak to this?
I can. I guess by statute, the mayor presents a budget and the council has the ability to cut the budget. This is cutting a revenue which is not under the purview of the council. If you're cutting a revenue, if you reduce the revenue, you're unbalancing the budget. So what the council can do is make a cut in the expenses and make the suggestion that reduction be offset by a reduction in the tax rate or in some other fee or whatever else. And while that's not binding on the mayor and the financial people, it is, I guess if we ignore it at our peril.
As I said, it's more of a symbolic cut.
Councillor Di Natale.
So this, in my opinion, is only practical and realistic to do if and only if there's a guarantee that the future mayor, current mayor, future mayor, and future city councils, more importantly, maintain this reduction in perpetuity. In testimony in previous years by the former assessors, reducing the tax levy increase must be sustained every single year. So the reason for that is because when the tax levy is calculated, it's calculated based on the prior fiscal year's starting point, irrespective of any reductions you approve of. It's a reset. So if you reduce it by $62,000, you have to ensure that $62,000 is reduced forever. Why do I say that? There's an average of 7,500 tax bills in the city of Fitchburg. Divided by $62,000, it's $8 a year. As the counselor on my far left said, symbolic, you bet it is, because it's $8 a year, $2 a quarter, if anything. It's not even noticeable. This proposal that a former colleague of mine on this council would continuously propose is purely for optics. It's to go back to the constituents and tell them, I tried to reduce the rate of growth in your tax bill, and the rest of the council said no, making us all look like we're for raising taxes, without giving them the proper context that not only will that cut not have any effect on your bill practically, mathematically, you got to sustain it forever. Because once that resets, whatever benefit, minuscule as it is, the resident gets this year if we approve it, and we don't approve it next year, they're just going to get hit next year. More so because we basically prevented what was coming down the pike. So whatever benefit they get, if it's noticeable, they're going to get hit the next year. Or whatever year it is that we don't sustain it. And there's no guarantee on that because we'll have new councils, we'll have different mayors, and the mayors have always proposed a 2.5. The comment that the tax rate has been going up because of our dual tax rate migration, everyone knows that your tax bill is based on value, not so much the rate. Your rate can go up, but your value, your payment may not go up in congruence to the rate of growth in your tax rate. So tax rate is secondary to your actual value and the market forces and the valuation in the city. So there is no stronger proponent of cutting taxes than me, but I want to wear my practical and realistic hat here. Unless it can be guaranteed that this council reduces the levy forever, you can't do this, because then the residents are just going to get delayed the inevitable. They're going to get whacked whatever year it is we don't keep it. And I want the residents watching at home to please hear me when I'm telling you this. And do not believe whatever spin you're going to hear that we were against lowering your tax bill if that's the vote this council takes. It's not true. We're actually looking out for you because what happens this year gets reversed next year. You're going to get whacked even more. The way you prevent tax increases in this city is through new growth, and if the growth gives us more cushion on our levy this fiscal year went from $5 million to $9 million, the ceiling. It went in the right direction. Our ceiling almost doubled because of the growth. Okay, now, we can discuss roads at another time, but again, practicality. They'll see no benefit from this monetarily, and whatever benefit they do see, it's highly likely they're going to get whacked in the future. I've said this many times in these meetings when this has been proposed before, and I'll keep saying it. To me, this is pure optics. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
First, I'd just like to ask the city solicitor to confirm that Auditor Brooks is correct that we lack the authority to cut from a revenue line item in the budget.
That would be something I'd have to look into, but my first line would be to go see Auditor Brooks and ask his opinion and direction in my research project.
Motion to approve the...
more concrete answer, Council.
Thank you.
Motion to approve the
Motion to
reduction.
approve the cut.
On the motion?
Second.
On the motion, Councilor Zarella.
So, regardless of whether we have total confirmation at the moment, as I've said many times in the past in my short tenure thus far, I do not want us to take a vote when it is questionable whether we have the authority to do so. Or rather, I do not want us to take a vote in a direction that is questionable as to our authority to do so. I believe that we must reject this cut simply because we aren't certain we can do it. Secondly, I agree with Councillor Di Natale, this won't actually have any effect. But thirdly, one thing we've been discovering throughout the course of this entire evening, and as we've all been examining this budget over the past while, there's nowhere to cut from. We can't pass an unbalanced budget. We can't pass a budget that has a $62,000 deficit. And I don't know where we're going to pull $62,000 from to make up that difference. So I think it's more or less obligatory to vote this one down.
We have a motion and second to approve the reduction in revenue by $62,000. All those in favor of the proposed reduction? Councilor Squalia. All those in opposition? 9 in opposition. Motion fails to carry. Next we have, this is on page 17, debt service reserve for capital spending, original amount $300,000, proposed reduction in its entirety to a proposed new amount of $0. Councilor Squalia.
So the large impetus of this proposed cut is that we have no budgeted savings here in this budget. We have the OPEB trust fund and the stabilization fund that we put in free cash, but we don't budget money to save in those accounts. And instead, we are budgeting money for debt service for the $300,000 reserve to spend money into debt. I'd like to see us budget funds to the stabilization fund and to the OPEB trust fund. In FY18, we put in $300,000 from free cash into stabilization, and we put in $250,000 into the OPEB. And in 2015, our OPEB liability was $128 million. And in 2017, in the independent auditor's report we just got, our OPEB liability is $154 million. You know, we're budgeting money to spend, but we're not budgeting money to save. And that's concerning to me, especially when I reviewed Leominster's budget, and their OPEB contribution is a budgeted line item. They contributed $2.2 million in FY16, $3.3 million in FY17, $4.4 million in FY18. And in FY17, Leominster made $2.2 million in revenue from its OPEB investment earnings. as it's...
Counselor, this is not for OPEB, nor is it,
This-
nor do we have the city of Leominster's budget in front of us.
It's-
So just, I would ask you to just
Because they have
Debt service.
$19.8 million in their OPEB trust fund. And we are budgeting money to reserve for capital spending into the future, budgeting money to spend us into debt, whereas we're not budgeting money to save. And that is the impetus behind this cut. Because, if we do not propose this cut, we cannot have this conversation.
Auditor Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the reason, the impetus for this line of $300,000 is from the presentation and the proposals we made for the renovation of City Hall. The debt service line item for 2019 includes the final payments for both the Fitchburg High School, can I say the new Fitchburg High School, 20 years, and the new fire station, 20 years. Starting in 2020, we won't have those two payments, and there's a drop-off, a significant drop-off in old debt service, close to $1.5 million. In addition, in making the proposals for the renovation of City Hall, we talked about 3 projects on the horizon. One is City Hall. The second is the possibility of a major project at the Crocker School. And the third is a major renovation of the library. So to get from here to there, there's going to, when those 3 projects come online, our debt service line item will be significantly higher, and we need to bridge the gap from here to there. If I could use a household example, a family where the family got married, husband and wife got married, bought a house, 15-year mortgage. They're at the end of the 15 years, they've paid off the mortgage. They now have $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month that they no longer have to put to the mortgage, and they can use on anything. So what should they do? Well, yes, they've paid off the house, but they've got a couple of kids who are now 14, 13, 12 years old, and they're going to be in college in 5 years. So they could live large for 5 years, let the kids worry about college and not worry, or they could take that money and begin to save it for the college payments coming down the line and doing some major work on the house so that when the college tuition bills come in, they've got a new roof on the house, they've done some works on the windows, and they've done other things. And that's basically what this proposal was. I talk about the beige sheet from the, okay, you know what I'm talking about. So that's just trying to get us from today's FY19 budget to the appropriate level we need for debt service when those 3 projects come due. This year, the proposal is about 300 to 350 in additional debt service. 50 of that's going into the short-term debt line to cover costs related to the Longzhou School roof. Next year, that could be over $1 million for that line, and $1.5 million in the third year. What I envision this reserve for capital spending is that it's money available for capital items next year. I would expect that the City Council would get a request from the mayor to transfer those funds from that $300,000 to the appropriate department for whatever project's being used, whether it be police vehicles, fire vehicles, DPW vehicles, building construction, those kinds of things. So the council will have a say on how that money is spent. But it's basically the first step in trying to step up and create space within our debt service line items so that we, in the year 2021, don't suddenly have to find another $1.5 million in the budget. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
So this is a private sector financial practice that I'm glad to see the city is doing, where they know what's going to happen in a few years, and instead of turning their eyes away from the obvious that's coming down the pike, they're preparing for it now. That's what I call forward planning. Not to mention the fact that that money can be used for anything. Am I to understand that the fire department needs a new ladder truck?
Yes.
DPW needs new equipment?
Yes.
and we were lectured by some people a few months ago on City Hall that we're neglecting our capital needs. Well, if you cut this $300,000, you're most certainly neglecting your capital needs. The comment about stabilization and OPEB, little history about that. There was no OPEB trust fund 5 years ago. When I was on the council...
Just to be equitable, I'd ask, OPEB is not in front of us, so I would ask that you keep it to this as well.
You don't budget those in here. They come out of free cash. And the OPEB trust fund was created because the council created it. And stabilization has over $6 million in it today, where it had nothing 8 years ago. So please, public, don't buy the argument that we're not saving for the future. The $300,000, as Mr. Brooks mentioned, if we were to cut it, is reckless because your debt service is at this level right here. Next year, it's going to go like this. Do we take all that money and blow it on recurring expenses when we know in 3 or 4 years it's going to go back up? No, that's reckless. That's financially insolvent. So I'm glad to see they're thinking ahead right now. And it's not just a buffer. We've got small needs in this city that have been neglected that we're going to start correcting. So anyone who votes against this cut is for lack of forward planning, does not want the fire department to get a new fire truck, does not want the DPW to get new equipment, does not want the police cruisers to be brand new. Because if we get rid of it, we can't use it for those things. So this is a smart way of budgeting for the future. And the term that we're going to put ourselves into debt, well, I guess every one of us has been putting ourselves into debt. College education, house, car, we're always in debt. You're not in debt if you can afford the payment, okay? If you can afford the payments, technically you are in debt, but you can afford the payments. You can't afford the payments, you go into default. We can afford the payments because our overall debt spending is at our affordability level of $45 million. Anything beyond $45 million makes us not able to pay for it. So City Hall, small projects, the fire station, the Crocker Library, they're within the confines of the $45 million, ladies and gentlemen. We're not spending ourselves into oblivion. So I hope this council rejects this recommendation. To vote for it is not only reckless, but it hampers our ability to take care of many crucial public safety capital projects. Thank you.
Motion to approve the cut.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Zarella.
So what I'm hearing basically is this and further funds that will be coming next year are basically lump sum revenues. That we'll be getting them once and then they'll be gone again because we'll need to put it into debt service for future items in future years. So if we were to allocate this to any kind of recurring line item, then would wind up underfunded a couple of years from now on that line item. If we were to allocate it to paying down any of the very large deficits that have been mentioned, which I won't mention because they're not in front of us, it doesn't sound like it would make enough of a dent to really be worth it. On the other hand, if we put it towards investing in the city, which it sounds like is what Auditor Brooks is looking to do, essentially, put it towards individual one-time expenses that come up in the next year or two, that gives us a return on this that is going to last past the point when the money's gone. This is, you win the lottery, you don't buy a new house with a bigger mortgage because the money's going to run out before the mortgage does. You put it towards maybe, I don't know, whatever is going to improve your life that you only have to pay for once and then it's done. Because then when the money runs out, you've still got the stuff, and you don't have the expenses anymore.
Councilor Squalia.
I'd just like to clarify, this is under debt service for capital spending, for debt service. So as Auditor Brooks mentioned, it was for borrowing for City Hall, borrowing for Crocker, borrowing for the library. These aren't, our one-time spending we want for free cash. When we have like a new pumper truck, we use free cash when we have that available. but we're budgeting here for debt service. And when it comes to the small one-time items, I'd like to see those in the budget as a line item. And I'd like to specifically see them in our budget as a line item under the requested column. Because in our budget here, the proposed budget that we all get, we have the mayor column, which is the mayor's proposal, and we have a requested column. But the requested column in all instances equals the mayor column. And what I would like to see is what was in the past is department heads request a certain line item. This is how they did it in Leominster's budget as well. And then we can see what gets cut. So if there is a line item for vehicles under fire department, pumper truck, then we can see that that's requested, and then we can see it was cut. And then we can have a discussion about it.
Counselor, that was already requested at a previous meeting, and the mayor told us he would look into it and address it in future budgets, but that's not before us. You still have the floor
Just
if you'd
to
like to address
clarify
reserve for
again,
capital spending.
intent. Thank you.
Councilor Tina Talley.
Mr. Brooks, can you please clarify? Is the $300,000 going to be used for smaller capital projects or not?
You may.
May I
Yes.
answer that? I would say yes. The intent, it's a little confusing in that we have a reserve for capital spending in the debt service department, if you will. The reason it's there is we're trying to create the space within debt service, so in 3 or 4 years, there's a steady growth in that line that will then meet our needs going forward. The intent is that that $300,000 will be used for capital, specifically for capital spending. If we put it somewhere else, it's harder to track in the future, and because it's capital, it's meant for one-time items, as I had suggested, vehicles, repairs on buildings, those kinds of things.
So, on this package about requests, if we were to see everything the department heads requested, we'd be beyond bankrupt. What's the purpose? To know what everybody wants? They want the moon and the stars. We can't
Counselor,
give it to them or else we'll go bankrupt.
Counselor, your point is taken, but the request has
So-
already been made, and we'll iron this out in the next.
But kudos to Leominster. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
I'd just like to point out that we're going to have capital needs in the next few years. We can spend it out of this money, which is essentially extra because we're in the period between closing out one debt service and beginning another. Or we can spend it out of other revenues. If we spend it out of other revenues, then we're servicing these new debts. We're not going to have enough money to cover those new debts, or we're not going to have enough money to cover any new capital spending during those years. Either one is not good. Now, I understand that the City Hall vote was not unanimous. I understand there were people opposed to it, but we did vote for it, and so we need to plan for what that's going to do to our budget. And that's what I'm hearing this is for.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut. All those in favor of the cut? One in opposition, Councilor Squalia. All those opposed? Raise your hand. What's that?
She's in favor.
Sorry, Councilor Squalia was in favor of the cut. All those in opposition to the cut? 9. The motion fails by margin of 1 to 9. The last proposed cut we have this evening is on page 26, Councilors. This is DPW Highway, CDBG reimbursement, Chapter 90, original amount $100,000, proposed reduction in its entirety for proposed new amount of $0. Councilors, again, this is a revenue account. We'd need both a corresponding expense to be cut if it is indeed within our purview to make such cut. Councilor Squalia.
Again, this is another symbolic cut. The DPW is underfunded in this budget, and it's even noted, in the notes in the back that Public Works is at or below levels to provide adequate services. And in all the positions that we've added in the past in this budget, FY15 through FY19, there's been 21.2 positions added, and 0.1 of those have been to Public Works. And in Public Works, we have a lot of employees that will be out due to workers' compensation. These are laborers. They do heavy, lifting and that kind of thing. And so when we do lose people from work, we lose a significant amount of work that can get done in the city. And again, back to the number one and number two complaints, the taxes and fixing the roads. And so to start with the DPW budget already in the red of $100,000, requiring them to have CDBG or Chapter 90 reimbursement, it's a hole that they have to fund right in the beginning with grant funding, straight off the bat. And I would like to see more money allocated to the DPW. If we were to see a requested line, I believe we'd like to see 6 more personnel to the DPW, as 6 more personnel would add another road crew to fix our roads in the city, for one thing. And it would also add personnel to fill in for cemeteries, for the parks, as they are frequently understaffed to service our 40 or so parks in the city. And so I would like to hear from the commissioner on this particular line item.
Commissioner Laxo.
Yeah, it's true. So every year we do start off the fiscal year $100,000 in the red. We started doing this about 7 or 8 years ago as a means to help the city balance the budget and avoid layoffs. So what it means is every year we have to sell our services to whoever will pay us, up to $100,000 by year end. That usually ends up being CDBG or Chapter 90. And there are other, like for instance, now we're doing the sidewalks on High Street. That money is from New View Communities, so they're helping us out with our budget. So what it means is our construction season lasts about 8 months during the year, so we have 8 months basically to make up $100,000, which means that it takes us about 3.5 people every day, from regular DPW work that we have to assign to Chapter 90 or CDBG. In addition, it is a huge administrative burden to track all of this stuff, to find out where we can sell our services, and we get a really complicated payroll that takes a couple of days to do every couple of weeks. So there is that burden as well. I did talk with the city auditor about this at the beginning of the budget process, and we were also doing this for engineering and administration, where we all had to fund 5 or 10% of each of our salaries from other areas. So we made progress with this year. We don't have to do that for the first time in the last 7 or 8 years, and the goal was to stop this process for the DPW highway crews as well. But I guess it's too much to do everything in one whack. I mean, we have done a lot of good projects for CDBG and Chapter 90 over the years, but there's nothing to say that we couldn't do that work anyway and just pay it out of our budget instead of the CDBG budget or the Chapter 90 budget.
Councilor Caddy.
So Lenny, there is a benefit though, because some of the projects that you have done, had we gone out and contracted that job, you've done it for a fraction of the cost. Yes. So, I mean, a lot of the, I can't think of one off my top of my head, but I know a lot of them. You keeping your guys employed. I mean, we're in a better position today than we were 6 years ago. But that, I think, I can remember when we started doing this with CDGB to keep your guys employed. Otherwise, you would have had layoffs. I would like to see an increase in your budget, of course. You're overburdened, but this is similar to like reducing the dual tax rate. We got to chip away at it. This isn't going to happen overnight. We just got to slowly chip away at it as the city progresses financially.
Councilor Di Natale.
Just to educate the public, there is no deficit in the highway budget. there's a deficit that occurs if you do this recommendation. So who in this room is prepared to cut $100,000 from a budget that is already bare bones? I'd like to see someone make that recommendation. So there is no deficit. It's created if you do this. That's number one. Number two, Chapter 90 money, Mr. Laxo, is that not used for roads legally? That can be used for roads, for road maintenance?
Sure.
And that's state money that we get every single year.
Right.
So it's not like a pie-in-the-sky, one-time revenue that we get, and we're never going to get it again. Correct? We have immensely increased our summer help accounts across all the DPW budgets for the busy seasons to compensate for this. And what I find interesting is you can't have it both ways. You can't keep throwing out the unfunded liability number on OPEB and pension and then say we need to hire 6 to 10 people in DPW. That doesn't equate. You're just exacerbating the unfunded liabilities. So if you want to add bodies somewhere, you should be reducing bodies elsewhere if you're that concerned about unfunded liabilities. But again, there is no deficit. There's a deficit if you vote for this. And then, if this gets passed, we then have to tell the mayor where we want to cut out of Mr. Laxo's skeleton crew budget. And then the potholes in the roads will certainly not get maintained. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
So, yes, I would love to add money to the DPW's budget if we had it to add. They do great work. They do a lot of work. And I would love to take these administrative burdens off of them. However, in 3 different ways, really, the key here is that this is a revenue line. Number one, if we cut it, it doesn't actually give them any extra funding. All it does is tell them, okay, don't go out and get this revenue stream, and so you're $100,000 out. Number two, there is literally nowhere else in the budget to cut. We're at the end of the proposed cuts, and there is no other cut we can vote for to make up this $100,000. And number three, unless the city solicitors have confirmed that we can, I'm still not at all confident that we are even permitted to cut a revenue line item.
Councilor Boschman.
You know, I get a kick out of this. I sit here and with amazement. I may not be the smartest guy here. This guy has to do wonders. He's taking crews off of the roads to go do CBG funds because he doesn't have enough money to support his budget. He doesn't have the manpower and he doesn't have the money. So he has to go to Marshall Road, Marshall Street, Johnson Street to put sidewalks in so he can support his men. I understand what she's trying to do. To bring it to the attention so he doesn't have to waste hours upon hours to try to figure out where the hell we're going to put them in. That's what we're doing. We've been patching roads all the way up to December. December, which it should be done in the summer. Now, this is ridicule. And if I seem upset, I am. I mean, we hired the police department, we hired the fire department, but we don't want the common laborer. The common laborer. We can get rid of him. He's a piece of trash. Get rid of him. Well, I'm going to make it well known tonight. I will not vote for a new fireman, so it may cost me an election, and I won't vote for a new policeman until we start hiring in the DPW. This is ridicule. I give her a right. She's right. He has to spend hours trying to figure out his budget. Figure it out. Sitting there trying to figure out where we're going to do the job so we can get money. And they should be already in there. And if I seem upset, I am, because I drive these stinking roads and I'm set up with them. Patch after patch, and then they're not done. Not done. None done there. They're not done. We're going right up to December because they don't have the manpower. Don't get me going. That's it.
Councilor Green.
I doubt that the DPW needs to specifically go out and find more work that we can call Chapter 90. They've got more work than they know what to do with. So the fact that we have a funding source called Chapter 90 that will help allocate to get the work done, how can you sit on both sides of the fence? You say you want the roads done, but you don't want to give them the funding to get it done? How do you expect the roads to get done if you're going to cut $100,000 out of the budget to get it done? There's not enough time to get it done. We've heard for years that we've sat on this council together that we are miles behind in road work because for years before this administration, it never got done. It never got addressed. So please don't talk out of both sides of your mouth when you talk about the DPW looking for work that will keep Chapter 90 money in our coffers.
Councilor Di Natale.
I will repeat again, because I guess it didn't sink in the first time. If we do this recommendation, you are sanctioning $100,000 of cuts out of DPW highway. It runs counter to what you just said, Counselor. I agree with you, a lot of what you said. These guys are stretched thin, they're bare bones, they have a lot to do and not a lot of people to do it. I hope you understand, by voting for this, you're sanctioning $100,000 of cuts out of his budget. I can't imagine a budget in this package that we would even think of doing that other than highway. And again, I want the public to understand something. Chapter 90 is for road work. It's a recurring state allocation. So us using it for highway purposes is not a bad budgetary practice. And CDBG, I'm sick and tired of already crapping on CDBG. You know, people want nice playgrounds. They want parks. Where do you think that money comes from? Beautification projects. You always talk about needing to do sidewalks. Where do you think the money comes for that? You want to not do sidewalks anymore? So it's people are contradicting themselves. It's unbelievable. If you support this, you're supporting a $100,000 reduction in the highway budget. You're going to support something that runs counter to what you just said. That's all. It's just a mathematical fact. Now we need to tell him, if we vote for this, where you want to reduce his budget by $100,000, which you just said correctly is a skeleton crew. Because I got news for people. If we do this, it's not fair to take the money somewhere else. We got to take it from him. And I'll say one last thing. We have been trying to pare grant reliance on personnel for years, and we're making inroads towards it. As Mr. Laxo just said, there are some line items in his personal expenses account that no longer rely on grants. That's good. The police fund their department with grants. The firefighters do. The Board of Health does. So if we're going to lambaste the city for using $100,000 of legitimate highway expense revenue money, then we should be consistent and reduce all the budgets in police, fire, and Board of Health for the grants they get. Who's ready to do that? Any takers? You want to do this? Be consistent. Do it across the board. So you vote for this, you're for a $100,000 cut in the highway budget. And the problems you identified would be even more exacerbated as a result. Just a fact. Thank you.
Motion approved.
I was remiss. I didn't give another department head an opportunity to speak to this cut who would be impacted as well, and that's Mr. Swarovski and Mayor, if you will, as well.
I'll be brief. I don't want to belabor the point here, but I feel like there are two separate issues, and it's been well hashed out. And I completely appreciate the sentiment, and I think DPW does need more support. And I think you can look at CDBG and Chapter 90 funds as a method of that support. Whether there are other means through which we could support DPW in the future is above my pay grade. But I think it's worth noting there's been a lot of rumors about CDBG. There's been a lot of rumors about home funds, that they're on the decline. I know the president has mentioned in various times that he wanted to cut those lines entirely. In fiscal year 18.
U.S. president, not the council president. I just want to make sure we're clear on that one.
I got to watch my nomenclature here. In fiscal year 18, both accounts were approved with a $1 billion plus increase with a Republican-led White House, Senate, and House. And in fiscal year 19, as it's working through subcommittees, they're keeping a similar $1 billion plus increase in those levels. So I think we need to stop thinking about CDBG and home as a liability and as an asset we can use to help meet our needs. I had a moment with the mayor came by my office a few months ago and said somebody had called me about Clarendon Street. They wanted to get Clarendon Street paved. And that's part of our CDBG action plan, that we have scheduled to pave that street because of a public process through a period of months that we work through to create a CDBG action plan that identifies areas of need in the community that we then take action on. These aren't arbitrary things that we're pulling the DPW in one direction opposite where they should be going. These are identified by the community as places we need to be working on. So this should be seen as a supplement. Whether or not there are other needs, I can't speak to that, but let's separate the two issues, please.
We have a motion and second on the floor, and just speaking to the motion, I'll say, Commissioner Laxo, you know better than anyone, and we all know around this table. You're stretched thin, you're understaffed, you're underfunded. But most importantly, you and your crew are overworked. And quite frankly, we could belabor the process all night, but the last thing you need is another late night. I see these DPW reports come through at midnight sometimes, or 2 in the morning. And I know that's not just because you enjoy the evening time, it's because there's very little time in the day. So I'm sorry that you had to spend the better part of an evening with us, but I thank you and your crews for the work. I have a motion and second to...
On the motion.
Mayor.
Can I make a statement regarding
You may.
CDBG and Chapter 90? Just to put it into context for the council and the viewing public. These are examples of what CDBG projects that have been completed because of that program. River Street sidewalk, Water Street sidewalk and fence, Field on Lady Road, Maiden North Streets, Coolidge Park fence, bike racks, handicap ramps, Kimball Road to train, planting of islands, removing of a fence and placing large rocks, installing bike racks in various parks, and installing a handicap ramps throughout the city. Paving of city streets for Chapter 90, Ashby West Road, Fisher Road, Stickney Road, Sheldon Road. Rebuilt the wall on Mechanic Street that was hit by a car. That was, I think, noted by all of us. Installed drainage on Beach Street where ice condition was, stormwater budget. Replaced fence at airport budget. Started to replace sidewalks. So these things are happening. The council is outraged by the fact that the roads need to be repaved. Are you willing to go for a debt exclusion, council?
A what?
A debt exclusion.
Mayor.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. We want the roads paved, Counselor. It's not going to happen by magic. We need revenue.
I have a motion and second.
On the motion.
On the motion, Councilor Boishman.
On the motion. Mayor, you're missing the whole point of this thing, and I believe Councilor Squari is right. Lenny, if it rained for the next 40 days before the fiscal year 19 budget comes into effect, will you have enough funds to carry you over to support your men if you couldn't do the work outside? If you couldn't do that work on Marshall Street, will you have the funds right now to carry your load and not go in a deficit? You're already in a deficit. Will you have the funds? If it rained every day from now to the first of the year, will you have the funds? I'm upset.
Counselor,
I'm not
if you're
yelling
in a
at the
situation...
department. I'm sorry if it seems like you're yelling at me. Will you have the funds?
No, we wouldn't.
You wouldn't have the funds. So what does that mean, Lenny, if you don't have the funds? Will you have to lay off?
Don't do the work.
Last time it rained for 40 days, we put them out.
Probably ask for money out of our free cash if we had it.
If you had it. But if you didn't have the free cash, what would we do? The whole purpose of this line item that she brought in, ladies and gentlemen, councilors, wasn't the fact to make me cut the budget on that. All she's trying to do is budget to give him the opportunity to work right. He has to scratch his head every night. Councilor DiNatale said he's working at midnight. You said it, Mike, he's working at midnight. He's working at midnight because we're making him work to midnight. We're not giving him a proper budget. He's in the red. And if it rained for the next 25 days to 30 days, he wouldn't have enough money to carry him through. And the CBG couldn't be used. It couldn't be used because it rained every day, and if you miss concrete with water, it goes away. It's no good to make a sidewalk. Mayor, I don't mean to attack you. I'm not trying to attack you, but we're taking valuable men. That's all I was trying to say to you from the DPW to do work because he doesn't have enough funds to go around and patch the holes. I understand that we don't have $110 million to do 110 miles of road. I understand that. But, to make the guy work extra hard so he can figure out the end of his budget for the end of the year to meet ends meet, this is not right. It's not right. If it rained for the next 30 days, he doesn't meet his budget. He's in the red. That's all I got to say.
Councilor Zarella.
And I apologize if you think I was yelling at you. I wasn't yelling at you, sir.
Councilor Zarella, you have the floor.
I just want to reiterate, this is a revenue line item. I'm not going to get into the authority thing again. I'm just going to say, as Councilor Di Natale has said many times, cutting this does not give Commissioner Laxo more money to work with. It does not keep him from having to find ways to do more with less. It does exactly the opposite. It denies him the difficult, but currently the only option for making up the shortfall in his budget. If we vote to take this out, we're not saying, let's take it out of free cash and give it to him instead. We can't do that. All we're doing is saying, let's stop approving the use of this grant money for his budget.
Councilor Squalia.
As I said right in the beginning, this is a symbolic cut. Councilors Di Natale and Zarella are right. If we take away this line item, that's $100,000 out of the DPW budget, and that's a problem. We're underfunding the DPW budget by $100,000, making them reliant upon CDBG funding. Now, if we gave the DPW the extra $100,000 and didn't make them rely on CDBG funding, could the DPW also do CDBG work as well? Would they not then, would you be able to have the DPW do CDBG funded work in addition?
Yeah, we could do it out of our own budget.
I'm saying, could the CDBG monies still go to fund DPW work? Right?
I think so.
I don't really.
Could we take 25,000 from CDBG funding and have a sidewalk done and the DPW do the work?
Depends on the area.
If there were.
Within a CDBG funded area.
Right. Conceivably, if we had that extra, if that tree existed.
We budget these funds because we know we're going to spend them from CDBG, so we build it in so the budget is balanced. Am I correct in explaining?
Correct. And the use of this $100,000 isn't any different than the using block grant funds to fund a position within the Board of Health. We used to have a second position or an additional positions in the Board of Health. We used to do some out of the building department. I think we recognize that we're relying on block grant and because it's DPW Chapter 90 money to assist with funding the DPW budget. The ultimate goal is, as we have done with the Board of Health and with the building department, is to wean ourselves from that dependency.
Right. What I would like to see is
so that the budget that's approved funds the basic, and I'm going to use the phrase 40-hour week, whatever the work week is in the DPW, so that their time is all budgeted and accounted for, and that the commissioner isn't in June trying to find resources to make sure that his people get paid. If there are projects that we're using city employees for on a block grant or Chapter 90, as long as it's in the budget, we can have the budget pay and get that much more distance in terms of materials and whatnot, or they could do it on overtime, and we could charge overtime to that.
Yes, so, I'd rather see the 100,000 included, worked into the DPW budget somehow, and then CDBG can supplement and add to the DPW budget, and then perhaps we could see a line item for road paving added to the budget instead of just added from free cash at the end of the year. Thank you.
I have a motion and second to approve the cut in revenue. Councilor Di Natale, I have a move to question, please.
What was it?
I have a move to question, so I'd ask you. I have a motion and second in favor of the cut. All those in favor of the reduction? All those in opposition? There are 10 in opposition. The motion fails to carry. That is the end of our cuts. I'd ask councilors for a 5-minute recess for us to recalibrate the orders before us. We'll resume in 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor.
Purpose of the review and vote of the mayor's FY19 budgets. Based on the cuts we have, the first order before us is 149.18. There be and hereby is appropriated the mayor's fiscal year 2019 operating budget, general fund, in the amount of $123,637,048. Airport fund of $659,600, water enterprise of $6,541,525, and wastewater enterprise in the amount of $12,736,020.
Move to approve. Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Do we need to amend?
Well, it should be as amended to the
I have
dollar
a
figure
motion
that was
and
stated.
a second to approve 149.18 as amended. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? One in opposition. Motion carries by a vote of 9-1. 150.18, appropriate
President, wasn't that just as amended? Isn't there a second vote? To then vote on it as amended?
That was as amended because we amended it as a are you asking to?
I'm a no.
Okay. I have a motion and second to approve 149.18 as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, hands in the air. 2 in opposition. Councilors Di Natale and Boschman in opposition. Motion carries 8-2. 150.18. Appropriate $700,000, same to be credited to fiscal year 2019 tax levy and charge against overlay surplus. 151.18. Appropriate 208,083, same to be charged against parking meter, garage receipts, and credit to fiscal year 2019 accounts. Treasurer personal services, $93,083. Treasurer expenses, $115,000. 152.18, appropriate $15,000, same to be charged against cemetery sale of lots and graves, and credit to fiscal year 2019 accounts. Cemetery personal services in the amount of $15,000. 153.18, appropriate $659,600, same to be charged against airport receipts reserved and credited to fiscal year 2019 airport fund accounts. Personal services, $240,070. Expenses of $419,530. 154.18, appropriate $12,736,020 and charge $10,859,500 against wastewater enterprise fund receipts and $1,876,520 against wastewater enterprise retained earnings and crediting fiscal year 2019 wastewater enterprise fund accounts. Personal services, $2,278,320. Expenses, $2,608,700. Indirect cost, $1,050,000. Debt service, $4,591,000. Capital expenses, $2,208,000. 155.18. Appropriate $6,554,525 and charge against water enterprise fund receipts and credit fiscal year 2019 water enterprise fund accounts. Personal services, $1,696,525. Expenses, $1,479,000. Indirect costs, $820,000. Debt service, $1,896,000. Capital expenses, $650,000. 156.18, that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the following revolving authorized.
Mr. President, make a motion that 150-18 through 156-18 be accepted.
I have a motion and second. to accept 150.18 up to and including 156.18. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? One in opposition. The motion carries. Council does entertain a motion to adjourn to then resume in a special meeting at council. I have a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned from the council as a whole committee meeting.